Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science. You open your eyes and the sky's a dark film stretched too tight, studded with the familiar glitter of satellites and the patient blink of a distant observatory. You probably won't survive this, in the best, most hyperbolic sort of way that makes late-night documentaries thrilling. But for now, you are safe in bed, the mattress folding around your shape like a small, indifferent planet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments so I can be jealous of your time zone. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake as if surfacing from black water, and the first thing you see is a telescope's pupil, the cold glass of an instrument trained on the fringe of the solar system. Through that lens, a visitor arrives. 3I/ATLAS, a name as clinical as a hospital tag, streaking in with a trajectory that has already made job descriptions awkward. It is not a normal comet. It knows none of the tidy Newtonian rules of most of the bodies that orbit our sun. You are there, leaning against the rim of that great lens, feeling the vibration of an observatory that has just received bad news in decimal form. You remember the story everyone repeated in 2017, when another interstellar trespasser, 1I/Oumuamua, slipped through our solar neighbourhood, a mainstream historical fact now stitched into every layperson's cosmic vocabulary. Oumuamua arrived like a riddle in polished metal, cigar phrases tumbling like curves, and a cloud of arguments so vigorous they had the warmth of a seasonal debate. Historians still argue whether the public reaction to Oumuamua said more about scientific method or about our appetite for mystery. That earlier visitor left breadcrumbs of uncertainty. 3I/TLAS arrives like someone who read the breadcrumbs and decided to bring a map. It hums, not literally, but you sense a frequency in the telemetry, brightness spikes, non-Keplerian drifts, an albedo that stubbornly resists categorization. At first, the calls were official and calm, routine discovery, follow-up observations requested. Then the tone shifts. The air in the control room goes from measured coffee to something like the fizz you get standing under fluorescent lights for too long. People who have spent careers avoiding alarm now whisper coordinates like spells, perihelion, nodal crossing, inclination. You float between them, a witness in a place that insists it is only doing its job. A fringe tidbit hums at the edge of the chatter, one of those late-night forum theories that smells faintly of coffee and desperation. What if the comet contains an engineered payload? You dismiss it with a polite exhale and an almost affectionate eye roll, because the vast majority of space oddities are explainable by ice, rock, and chaos. Still, even the most skeptical of you keeps a notebook just in case. Jokes ripple through the room to loosen the tension. Maybe it's just lost and asked for directions, someone says. Another replies, at least have the decency to text ahead. And everyone laughs too loudly because laughter is a small, fragile immune system against terror. The instruments paint the body in wavelengths you can taste. Radio like low notes, optical like paper and ash, infrared warmed like stale oven air. The tail is not a single plume but a braided ribbon, and the coma, that foggy halo of sublimating material, carries spectral lines that nudge at your hypotheses. Water, yes. Carbon, yes. But also a curious excess of certain silicon signatures that put a different kind of knot in the chest of mineralogists. Your brain, trained to reduce anxiety by categorizing, makes lists. Fresh comet, extinct comet, interstellar rock, or something else we haven't a tidy name for. You're aware too of the human scaffolding around this thing. Observatories coordinate like orchestras that have never practiced together. Amateur astronomers in backyards that smell of cut grass join professional arrays with feeds and timestamps. A student in a dorm room sends a calibration file that corrects an error a century of trained eyes missed. The world narrows to a conversation about angles and light curves. News anchors, who must fill airtime, ask scientists for metaphors. Is it like Halley? Someone asks, and a researcher reminds them that Halley's comet was recorded in 1066 and observed for millennia. A useful grounding fact that makes humanity seem simultaneously insignificant and very old. The reporter nods, smiles, and says something about destiny anyway. You watch the sky as if it were a movie screen and you have the only remote. The comet's path is elegant and slightly rude, threading through orbital planes like a cyclist cutting corners at a roundabout. There is an odd intimacy to watching a thing move with such indifferent purpose. You feel less like an audience member and more like a neighbour peeling an onion. The slow, patient calculations of orbital mechanics are suddenly alive. Numbers that used to be dry become a language of potential catastrophe or cosmic curiosity. One spreadsheet row reads like a prophecy. Close approach, velocity, residuals, probability of intersection. Your fingertips itch to reduce uncertainty. You want to run another simulation just to be sure you didn't misplace a decimal. Outside, a dog barks somewhere in a city that does not sleep. Inside, someone hums a tune from childhood to steady their hands. You sense that the world is holding its breath in micro-exhalations, airlines checking contingency plans, insurers making quiet phone calls, school teachers marking the calendar for something no one is ready to write down. And there you are, in the control room and in bed at once, a hybrid of scientist and listener, told to keep your eyes heavy while your brain catalogues a comet that does not belong. A last small joke, because the human species refuses to stop being human when the sky rearranges itself. You imagine an alien customer support line where a voice says, "We're sorry for the inconvenience. Your package is delayed due to unexpected gravitational interactions." It's absurd, and that absurdity keeps you tethered to the present, where the comet continues its quiet trespass and you continue to watch. You stand at a desk lit only by the blue of half-charged monitors. Coffee has cooled into a kind of chemical relic, and somewhere behind you the printer sighs as if exhausted by math itself. The countdown to certainty has begun, and every equation whispers a different flavour of doom. The comet's position is being refined hour by hour, but what began as a routine fit of orbital parameters has now metastasized into something the tabloids will soon call the panic curve. Numbers appear calm, until they aren't. One jitter of data, one recalibrated telescope, and suddenly the line connecting 3I/ATLAS to the ecliptic brushes far too close to the coordinates labelled Earth. You hover in the quiet storm of calculations. Dozens of screens run Monte Carlo simulations, each one an artificial universe collapsing in fast motion. You watch them like snow globes, shaken by invisible hands. Out of 1,000,000 runs, maybe 2 or 3 end with impact. The odds are still small, but small is such a terrible adjective when the prize is extinction. Someone mutters, "Remember Shoemaker-Levy 9?" And instantly the room brightens with shared dread. That's the mainstream historical anchor, the comet that broke apart and slammed into Jupiter in 1994, leaving bruises larger than Earth. For years afterward, classrooms used those images as proof that celestial violence never really went extinct. Historians still argue whether our fascination with Shoemaker-Levy came from scientific wonder or from a guilty thrill at watching another planet take the hit for us. Either way, the comparison isn't comforting tonight. You're not just watching data, you're feeling it. Each iteration drops a bead of sweat down your spine. The graphs pulse like EKGs. Someone cracks the inevitable joke. At least if we die, no one will grade our code reviews, and laughter skitters across the room like static electricity. Humour is the anesthesia of intellect, thin but necessary. Outside, the world is unaware. It's still Tuesday. Delivery drivers argue about tips. Kids scroll through short videos of cats looking at laser pointers, and somewhere a politician insists the budget for space surveillance can be trimmed without consequences. Inside this lab, though, you know consequences are already coiling. You pull closer to the monitor showing orbital plots. The Earth's blue marble and the comet's red arc approach in an elegant tango that would be beautiful if it weren't lethal. The uncertainty bands, those translucent veils of probability, narrow with each new observation. You feel like you're watching a funnel close around your own breath. A fringe tidbit makes its way through the chat room, a message from a retired mathematician in Chile claiming that the comet's perturbations don't follow classical gravitational models. He suggests in his politely deranged email that 3I/ATLAS might be self-correcting its path. The moderators flag it as nonsense, but privately, several analysts rerun their models using variable mass assumptions just to be sure. It's ridiculous, of course, comets don't steer, but you can almost hear the collective hesitation in the keyboard clicks. You step outside for air and find none. The mountain observatory's atmosphere tastes of metal and frost. Overhead, the stars seem arranged by an uncaring accountant. The comet itself is too faint for the naked eye, but you know exactly where it is, and that knowledge alone makes the darkness feel personal. Back inside, the official statement is being drafted. You glimpse phrases like, "No immediate cause for alarm and probability remains extremely low." You know those lines are designed less for accuracy than for public digestion. They'll buy a few days of calm before the next update tightens the odds again. A colleague mentions that Galileo once miscalculated the size of Neptune's orbit by a factor that would make any intern blush. A small mercy, since it reminds everyone that even legends make errors. Historians still argue whether scientific humility began with those miscalculations, or whether we invented humility later, as damage control. The thought makes you smile. Then the smile fades as a new dataset arrives from Mauna Kea. The residual error, those tiny differences between prediction and measurement, has shrunk to almost nothing. The comet isn't deviating randomly, it's following a path so precise it feels scripted. When the computer renders the latest orbit overlay, a single pixel representing Earth lies squarely inside the cone of uncertainty. A deep hush follows, not silence exactly, just the absence of denial. Someone begins counting days out loud. Another asks for the impact energy assuming a 3-kilometer body travelling at 60 kilometers per second. The answer, displayed in a flash of exponents, could melt oceans. You feel your throat dry up, as though your body has performed its own little evacuation drill. And yet, amid the dread, a strange calm blooms. You realise how rare it is to be alive at the exact moment the universe acknowledges you. To see numbers transform into destiny. It's the purest science has ever felt. Brutal, clean, unromantic. Another joke surfaces, thin as paper. If it hits, at least we'll finally solve the parking problem. Nobody laughs this time. The comet continues its slow burn across space, and you sense the invisible timer begin to tick louder. When the public announcement finally goes out, you're already watching the first wave of panic ripple through social feeds. Misquotes, doctored images, amateur predictions, chaos, but strangely comforting chaos. Humans doing what humans do best, narrating the unknown. You glance back at the last simulation running on your screen. The impact point glows over the Pacific like a heartbeat underwater. You whisper the number to yourself, as if saying it aloud will make it less real. The printer sighs again, spitting out a graph that curves like a blade. You take it, smooth the paper, and imagine the thin line of ink as a scar drawn across the planet's future. You remember Oumuamua the way people remember a single line from a song that keeps looping in the back of their head. Sharp, strange, impossible to forget. In 2017, that cigar-shaped interstellar object was detected by Pan-STARRS and promptly became the world's favourite unsolved crossword. Mainstream historical fact, tidy and unavoidable. Back then you watched as telescopes pivoted like nervous birds, and the internet filled with more theories than the object had facets. Historians still argue whether Oumuamua's celebrity was a triumph for open science or a distraction created by our desire for spectacle. Either way, the echo of that first visitor sets the tone now. Curiosity braided with an itch that won't go away. You're in the same pattern of late-night obsession. Forums, preprints and threads thick with people who sign their messages with observatory codes. Oumuamua taught you a useful lesson about humility, about how quickly confident models can fray when faced with a thing that behaves like neither rock nor comet. Back then, its non-gravitational acceleration made some scientists murmur the absurd hypothesis that outgassing was to blame. Others suggested exotic things, a nitrogen iceberg, a fragment of an exoplanet's surface, or even thin light sails catching photons like cosmic kites. One fringe tidbit you remember best was the high-profile, eyebrow-raising paper that dared to mention the possibility of an artificial origin. It was debated openly, argued politely, and then, in the way academic arguments do, it fermented into a long list of follow-ups. You keep that memory like a souvenir, useful for reminding yourself how science can be both brave and awkward. In the control room where 3I/ATLAS is now the subject of caffeine-fueled devotion, Oumuamua's scandals are not abstract. They are templates. You watch grad students adopt strategies learned from the last time, double-check your calibrations, publish datasets, and prepare for the inevitable media storm that prefers drama over nuance. The public remembers the sensational headlines, alien probe, and forgets the slow choreography of measurements that finally produced consensus. Historians still argue whether the public's appetite for the extraterrestrial encouraged sloppy journalism, or whether publicity is the oxygen that lets scientific questions survive in the wild. You find yourself smiling at the irony. Curiosity saved science's funding and ruined its quiet. There's a pattern too of human behaviour that Oumuamua revealed with uncomfortable clarity. Once the possibility space expands, once people allow themselves to whisper engineered or signal, the rumour economy explodes. Amateur observers trade low-resolution images like baseball cards. Conspiracy channels splice spectrographs into ominous montages, while a late-night host jokes that the object was probably just an interstellar RV looking for a good campsite. You chuckle that laughter is still part of the toolkit. 3 jokes in a row because the script demands it. Maybe its Yelp review said, 5 stars, great gravity. Another, if it were an alien probe, at least it had the decency to arrive after rush hour. And a quieter one because you are tired. It sent us its Instagram handle, but none of us knew how to follow. Scientifically, Oumuamua forced a re-evaluation of categories. Comet, asteroid, interstellar interloper. At the boundary, our definitions wobble. You watch spectral plots and remember how those first colour curves were called data that refused to be boxed. The object's tumbling rotation, its peculiar brightness variations, and that faint but persistent extra push raised questions that textbooks weren't built to answer. Panels convened, papers proliferated, and slowly a consensus coalesced. One that accepted uncertainty as an answer in itself. That was a different kind of knowledge, provisional, communal, and a little bit bruised. Historians still argue whether acknowledging uncertainty publicly in that moment strengthened trust in science or eroded it. You file that debate under useful discomfort. Now, with 3I/ATLAS, every mention of Oumuamua is a mental punctuation mark. You and your colleagues flip through the old literature like a detective rifling through cold case files, hunting for methodological mistakes and brilliant insights that time has softened. Some approaches from 2017 get retooled, better photometric corrections, more coordinated observation campaigns, and a renewed emphasis on data sharing. There's a communal memory of embarrassment too, the time someone misread a calibration lamp as a commentary feature and tried to publish a sensational claim. The memory is useful. It keeps egos in check and reminds you that the cosmos doesn't care about your career plan. That said, the emotional residue of Oumuamua shows up in stranger ways. A small cluster of amateur radio operators who once rallied around the object with hopeful scans for an artificial signal now ping the skies with more sophisticated arrays. Their efforts are earnest and slightly melancholy. That first broadcast found nothing, but the volunteers keep trying. You find their optimism contagious. A fringe theory you used to mock, about tiny dusty propulsion mechanisms altering a body's motion, has nudged a few open-minded analysts to include non-traditional force terms in their orbital fits. It's not mainstream yet, but the modeller's willingness to try silly math is exactly what you love about the field. You notice how narratives congeal. Oumuamua began as a footnote in catalogues and ended as a cultural artifact, referenced in op-eds and late-night sketches. The public learned a new vocabulary: non-gravitational acceleration, light curve amplitude, interstellar origin, and then moved on to the next thing. Humans do that. They assimilate wonder into everyday language and then use it for memes. The sociologists call it normalization. You call it necessary forgetting. It's how a species survives long enough to ask the next question. And there is a darker echo. When the possibility of impact enters the conversation, the prior spectacle of Oumuamua complicates public response. Some people, hardened by the memory of overblown headlines, assume every new claim is media theatre. Others, having tasted cosmic possibility, leap to worst-case scenarios with practice speed. The net result is a crowd split between nothing to worry about and call your mother. You oscillate between those poles, an internal weather system that never quite settles. At 3 a.m, you scribble in the margins of a printed preprint that Oumuamua's anomalous acceleration might have taught a generation something useful: caution. Not the cowardly kind, but the careful kind. You make a list, corroborate, replicate, publish raw data, invite critique. These are boring actions, but they are the bedrock of surviving surprise. And as your mind wanders back to the present, back to 3I/ATLAS threading the sky, you hold Oumuamua's ambiguities like a talisman, a reminder that answers sometimes arrive as more questions, and that science is a conversation, messy and persistent. You close the folder and let the memory of that first interstellar visitor fade into the background hum of the observatory, like a song finally finishing its chorus. Outside somewhere, someone tells a joke about crocodile dung sunscreen, an image you heard in another time, and you smile because callbacks are a comfort. You turn back to the monitors. The new comet is waiting, and this time you are determined not to be surprised in the same way. The press conference feels like déjà vu with worse lighting. You stand near the back of the auditorium, clutching a notebook that has already surrendered to coffee stains and panic doodles. The air is thick with the musk of anxiety and TV makeup, that faint powder smell of manufactured composure. At the podium, the head of the International Astronomical Union clears his throat with the gravity of a man about to lie politely. The official line is predictable. Preliminary data suggest there is no immediate danger. The word immediate lands like a mosquito bite. Small, ignorable, but impossible not to scratch. You watch the journalists react in micro-expressions. A few skeptical brows, a handful of nervous smiles, and one tabloid reporter who's already composing the headline "Death Comet Spares Earth." For now, you can't help it. You laugh under your breath. Humor again, your tiny rebellion. The woman beside you, a freelance science writer, glances over and murmurs, "We should start a drinking game for every time they say low probability." You whisper back, "We'd be drunk before the Q&A." As the slide deck clicks through bland bullet points, orbital diagrams, albedo estimates, compositional spectra, you catch the flicker of a different truth on the scientists' faces. They're tired, drawn, almost translucent. The official numbers don't align with the body language. Their eyes keep darting to a monitor just off stage, where fresh data scrolls in real time. You know that look. It's the face of people pretending the math isn't getting worse. A mainstream historical fact floats into your head to distract you. In 1989, when Voyager 2 flew past Neptune, engineers had to correct its trajectory on the fly using signals that took hours to return. That mission succeeded barely, because humanity's relationship with luck is apparently contractual. Historians still argue whether the triumph of the Voyager program came from scientific genius or sheer statistical mercy. Either way, that ancient broadcast from the edge of the solar system feels like a prayer now, a reminder that sometimes precision isn't enough. You also need grace. The podium lights flare brighter as questions begin. Has the trajectory changed? What's the government's contingency plan? Are you coordinating with defense agencies? The spokesperson answers in a soothing monotone, reciting prepared phrases that sound like bedtime stories for bureaucrats. Monitoring continues. Uncertainties remain. Public safety is our top priority. The rhythm is almost hypnotic until a journalist from a European network interrupts. So if the object does strike, where would it hit? A cough, a glance between officials. The microphone pops. One of the scientists, a man whose nervous habit is tugging his ear, leans toward the mic. Statistically speaking, the highest concentration of potential impact sites is over open ocean. It's true, technically, and you can almost hear him clinging to that technicality like driftwood. Someone shouts, "Which ocean?" He hesitates, then says, "The Pacific," and the room exhales all at once, as if a confession has been made. You know what's happening next because it happens every time. The communication offices of half a dozen nations start crafting identical statements about vigilant optimism. Satellite networks prepare infographics with calm blues and greys. The internet, however, will not be calm. Within an hour, #Pacific Impact will trend, accompanied by photoshopped tsunamis, influencer prayers, and one guy selling "I survived 3I/ATLAS" t-shirts on Etsy. A fringe tidbit starts bubbling up before the briefing even ends. A leaked internal memo claiming that new spectroscopic data shows trace isotopes inconsistent with natural formation. It spreads through encrypted chat groups like static. You hear someone whisper, "manufactured debris," and another, "mining tailings from a destroyed moon." You pretend you didn't hear, but your stomach tightens anyway. When the conference disperses, the hallway becomes a trench of reporters chasing quotes. You slip out a side exit, the door thunking shut behind you like punctuation. Outside, the night air tastes of rain and camera batteries. You walk toward the temporary media tents, their nylon walls trembling in the wind, and for a moment you think of circus tents. How humans can transform existential dread into spectacle in under 15 minutes. Someone calls your name. It's Dr. Anika Reyes, one of the orbital dynamicists. Her hair is pinned up with a pencil, a detail so charmingly academic it almost makes you laugh. They're not telling them everything, she says quietly. You don't ask who they are. That pronoun always arrives preloaded with ambiguity. She hands you a folded printout, fresh from a restricted feed. The new trajectory solution is bolded in red. It's closer, much closer. The world, you realise, just pivoted a few degrees toward the worst version of itself. Annika sighs. We'll issue a correction in 2 days. They'll call it computational refinement. By then, half the planet will have turned it into a meme. Her tone is dry enough to sandpaper hope. You reply, if we're lucky, they'll make good memes. She smirks, tired but genuine. Yeah, we could use better jokes at the end of the world. Later, in your hotel room, you scroll through livestream replays of the press event. Frame by frame, you notice the way people react. One scientist biting his lip hard enough to draw blood, another tapping a pen like a metronome. The human body leaks truth even when the mouth is trained to seal it. Outside your window, the city blurs into streaks of wet neon. It's raining hard now. Cars hiss along the boulevard like migrating fish, oblivious to cosmic schedules. You think of how small the entire human species looks from the comet's perspective. 1 pixel of quarrels, ambition, and coffee. A notification pings. Annika again. New data incoming. Don't sleep. You smile faintly, because sleep feels like a rumour these days. You whisper a line from an old science documentary. In space, trajectory is destiny. Then you close the curtains and start calculating your own trajectory. Coffee, midnight, the thin edge of reason. The press may have calmed the crowd, but the real countdown has only just begun. The simulation room is dark except for the screens, hundreds of them, each a miniature apocalypse repeating on loop. You drift through like a ghost haunting probability. Every display shows an Earth being punched by the same object in slightly different ways. Angle, velocity, density, entry vector. Supercomputers hum in the background, their fans a choir of nervous monks. You're here because numbers can lie only by omission, and tonight they're telling the whole terrible truth. These models, elegant disaster, someone once called them, have become the planet's bedtime stories. You press your palm to one monitor, watching as the simulated shockwave expands outward, devouring blue until only grey remains. The planet cracks like sugar glass, beauty and annihilation stitched together by math. The scientists have stopped pretending this is academic. Each workstation has a sticky note with a name, a favourite coffee order, a small talisman against despair. One says, feed the cat. Another, remember to laugh. You decide that's good advice and murmur, at least we're getting great render quality out of this. A few tired chuckles ripple through the room. One more joke. If we survive, Hollywood's going to owe us royalties, and then softer. If we don't, at least the effects will be accurate. A mainstream historical fact anchors your whirling mind. When the Tunguska event flattened Siberian forest in 1908, it released energy equivalent to roughly 15 megatons of TNT, small compared to what the screens are showing. That explosion leveled 80 million trees yet left no crater. Historians still argue whether the mystery of Tunguska fueled early 20th century fascination with cosmic doomsday, or merely provided pulp writers with a new monster to blame. Either way, humanity has always rehearsed its own extinction in imagination first. The lead engineer, Dr. Koenig, waves you over. He's hollow-eyed, caffeine in human form. Watch this run, he says. We added atmospheric shear and full ocean heat transfer. The display starts again, a slow zoom on the Pacific. The comet strikes. Plunge, bloom, vapor column. Within seconds, the ocean becomes plasma. The screen reads, energy yield equals 1.6 times 10 to the 24th power joules. Enough to boil continents. Beautiful, you whisper, in the least comforting sense of the word. Koenig shrugs. I used to simulate hurricanes. This is easier. At least this storm only kills once. The room falls silent again except for the whir of processors. You wander between terminals, reading the outcomes like fortune cookies. Impact. Angle 47 degrees. Total ejector lofted into stratosphere. Impact angle 23 degrees. Near miss. Global tsunamis. Impact angle 12 degrees. Ricochet. Secondary fragments inbound. Each scenario is a variant of loss. A fringe tidbit surfaces among the late-night engineers, rumour of a shadow project running separate simulations under defence oversight, claiming that 3I/ATLAS might be hollow. Hollow bodies behave differently. They compress, absorb, explode in unpredictable geometries. You ask Koenig if he's heard of it. He just mutters, "Everything's hollow when you zoom in far enough," and returns to typing. Hours pass in computer light. You think of the first time humans simulated catastrophe not for entertainment, but for survival. The Manhattan Project's early code runs predicting nuclear firestorms. Back then, every miscalculated decimal could have changed history. You realise these machines, with their perfect precision, are performing the same ritual. Summon destruction in silico, so maybe it won't happen in reality. Historians still argue whether simulation culture began as an ethical shield or as a new form of control. At 3 a.m, a klaxon of delight breaks the gloom. One model, run number 11,973, shows deviation. The comet fragments pre-entry, splitting high in the mesosphere, scattering debris across remote oceanic coordinates. Survivable. Sort of. Koenig raises his hands like a victorious conductor. See? Probability of extinction down by 0.003%. You grin, half mad from exhaustion. "Pop the champagne," someone answers. "We'd need a crate the size of Australia." That moment of absurd joy fades quickly. The simulation cycles again, and the fragments, those hopeful little miracles, merge mid-fall due to gravitational coupling. Impact. Total. The screen blinks. Recombined, mass restored. "Maybe," Koenig says quietly, "the universe just doesn't like loopholes." You pace toward the panoramic window. Outside, dawn slides up the mountainside in bruised orange. The sky looks innocent, and you hate it for that. You think of the Greek myth of Atlas, how he held the heavens not as punishment but as necessity. You whisper to yourself that 3I/ATLAS was badly named. Maybe it's not holding the sky up, maybe it's dropping it. Down the hall, journalists have been locked out, but their voices leak through the ventilation. Speculation, accusation, a stew of fear and clickbait. You imagine tomorrow's headlines: computers confirm planetary roulette. Humanity's collective coping mechanism is storytelling, and right now every story is a form of denial. You return to your station, eyes grainy. The latest batch of runs is finishing. The data table scrolls like a prayer wheel: impact times, entry velocities, death tolls implied in digits. It's strangely soothing. The universe rendered in consistent units. Joules, pascals, kilometers. Human panic doesn't fit into those columns. Koenig taps your shoulder. "Get some rest." You answer, "After the next run." He smirks. "That's what the comet said too." The next run begins, and you watch the colours bloom. Reds, blues, greens, like an aurora made of catastrophe. The room feels warm, almost cosy, the way bonfires do right before they eat the forest. You close your eyes, just for a second, letting the hum of machines become the sound of wind through leaves. In that hum, you hear the faintest rhythm, countdowns disguised as lullabies. The chemist's lab smells faintly of ozone, coffee, and cautious optimism. 3 scents that, together, mean someone's about to announce either a breakthrough or a nervous breakdown. You slip inside quietly, expecting the usual post-midnight murmur of machines, but the air hums with a different tension tonight. A group of scientists crowd around a mass spectrometer display, the blue glow painting their faces in equal parts awe and disbelief. On-screen spectral peaks rise and fall like city skylines. You catch the label at the bottom, tail emission sample, 3I/ATLAS. The data is raw, scraped from high-altitude balloons and orbital sensors, yet even through the noise, something strange emerges, chemical signatures that don't belong in any cometry textbook. You lean closer. There it is again. A narrow band of compounds that should decompose within seconds in vacuum. Polysilicate chains, fused carbon lattices, materials closer to industrial ceramics than to cosmic ice. A younger chemist, barely out of grad school, whispers the unthinkable. "That pattern looks manufactured." You hear the word hang in the air like forbidden incense. Manufactured. The room collectively pretends it didn't happen. Someone coughs. Another fidgets with a glove box. You decide to break the tension with a quip. Well, maybe it's just the universe doing quality control. A couple of strained chuckles answer you. One more joke for morale. Finally, proof that the cosmos recycles. But humour can't mop up this kind of implication. The senior researcher, Dr. Elamine, clears her throat and taps the screen. These are preliminary. Could be contamination from the collection apparatus. Could be data bleed from an Earth-based source. Let's not rewrite physics before breakfast. Still, she orders another round of verification. You watch the robotic arms reload the tiny samples, dust motes trapped from the comet's outer halo, into analyzers. The hum deepens, and in that moment, you realize the room feels like a chapel. Every hiss of gas, every beep of calibration becomes liturgy. A mainstream historical fact rises to steady your nerves. In 1910, when Halley's Comet passed close to Earth, panic spread because newspapers claimed its cyanogen gas tail would poison the atmosphere. Entrepreneurs sold anti-comet pills and bottled pure air to gullible crowds. Historians still argue whether the incident was the birth of modern media hysteria or simply a rehearsal for it. You think about those old pamphlets now, the breathless typography promising safety from a sky that never cared. People haven't changed much, just the font and the bandwidth. The results arrive, the anomalies persist, the compounds appear too complex to be random, layered structures, repeating motifs, subtle isotopic biases. Dr. Elamine rubs her temples. If this were a meteorite sample, I'd call it synthetic polymer contamination, she mutters, but we're sampling from a comet moving at interstellar velocity. Her assistant says softly, "So what does that make it?" She doesn't answer. Theories start to spiral, thin and frantic. One team suggests exotic chemistry, pressure-tempered silicates forged in the atmospheres of dead stars. Another argues that our instruments are misreading cross-linked volatiles as polymers. A third team, the Sleepless Fringe, suggests alien engineering. You feel the gravitational pull of that word again, heavier this time. Alien. It's a word that makes grants vanish and reputations implode. The chatter reminds you of a lab legend from the 1980s, a group of Soviet chemists who swore they'd found microelectronic patterns in a meteorite fragment. When no one believed them, they buried the fragment and their careers together. You mentioned it aloud. Someone nods grimly and says, "Maybe we'll get matching headstones." A burst of laughter follows, not the joyous kind, but the desperate human sort that fills vacuum better than oxygen. You note it down mentally as your third joke quota, though it tastes bitter on the tongue. By dawn, confirmation samples arrive from an independent observatory in Chile. They show similar signals. The odds of contamination drop to nearly zero. The data slides across global networks faster than clearance levels can stop it. Within hours, the leak hits social media. Comet's tail contains engineered materials. The phrasing is careful enough to avoid libel, reckless enough to ignite global fascination. In Geneva, the International Response Council issues a statement dismissing the reports as instrumental artifacts. You picture the press officers sweating over their keyboards, trying to phrase denial in language that still sounds confident. Meanwhile, the chemists become overnight celebrities and pariahs. Half the world calls them visionaries, the other half frauds. Historians will still argue one day whether this was the moment science communication finally broke under pressure. You sit on a stool watching sunrise pour through the lab windows. Dust particles glitter like suspended stars. Elamine hasn't moved for minutes, just staring at the frozen spectra. "If this is real," she says finally, "we're not looking at a comet. We're looking at something that's been built, maybe dismantled, maybe discarded." Her voice trails off. The word discarded makes your pulse quicken. You picture some distant civilization cleaning out its cosmic attic and tossing debris across the galaxy. The thought is equal parts wonder and insult. What if Earth's first interstellar visitor is someone else's trash? Outside, trucks from the media compound arrive, bright logos promising breaking truths. You know the circus will begin again in minutes. Reporters will demand clarity. Governments will demand silence. Between those demands, truth will try to breathe. As you leave the lab, the hum of equipment follows like a lullaby for anxious minds. The spectrometer continues to blink, indifferent to fame or fear. You think of that old line attributed to Arthur C. Clarke, that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and amend it privately in your head. Any sufficiently advanced discovery is indistinguishable from panic. You smile exhausted and whisper to yourself, "So much for pure ice and rock." Then you pull the lab door shut and the click echoes like the punctuation at the end of a fragile certainty. The bunker list leaks on a Friday, as bad news tends to. It begins with a spreadsheet on an obscure server. Columns of coordinates, names of companies, construction budgets that read like phone numbers. Within hours, the file circulates through encrypted chat rooms, then leaks to the public like blood in water. You see it reposted everywhere. The billionaire escape lottery. The phrase catches on instantly. The late-night comedians will love it, if late-night comedians still exist next month. You scroll through the data, your eyes snagging on familiar surnames. Tech founders, hedge fund titans, movie producers, all the people who once declared faith in progress and innovation, now digging themselves downward. Some are building under New Zealand's basalt. Others are funding orbital arcs, luxurious cylinders to preserve select genetic diversity. You can almost hear the fine print. Diversity meaning people who can afford the ticket. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind to keep the bitterness balanced. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union built over 1,000 nuclear bunkers between them. Most have since collapsed or been converted into museums. Historians still argue whether those bunkers represented genuine survival planning or just architectural expressions of anxiety. You suspect this new generation doesn't care about the distinction. Your phone buzzes, a push notification from a newsfeed that still insists on cheery fonts. Celebrities invest in future shelters as scientists monitor comet. You groan. Invest, you murmur, as if you can buy an exemption from physics. It's a line you wish you hadn't said aloud because a nearby grad student hears and laughs. Maybe gravity takes bribes, they reply. The room chuckles. That's joke one for the section. Dark humour as coping mechanism and social glue. Later that night, you find yourself doom-scrolling through bunker advertisements, sustainable ecosystems, private theatres, hydroponic champagne. The promotional videos show smiling actors pretending to harvest lettuce beside LED suns. You catch yourself thinking the architecture looks eerily like luxury prisons. Same polished claustrophobia, different marketing. A fringe tidbit emerges from one of the wilder forums that a handful of billionaires are funding something beyond bunkers, a deep-sea vault tethered to geothermal vents, codenamed Abyss Arc. The rumour claims it's designed to outlast centuries of surface uninhabitability. The accompanying concept art shows domes glowing on the ocean floor like jellyfish colonies. You can't tell if it's satire or blueprint, but either way, the image lodges in your brain. In meetings, the scientists try not to discuss the bunker craze. Let's focus on data, someone says, as if equations could drown out envy. But focus phrase easily. The engineers talk about underground air cycling, the physicists about orbital decay, the psychologists about whether isolation drives people insane faster underground or in space. You realise that the moment humanity started calculating doomsday trajectories, a different kind of math took over, the arithmetic of privilege. News spreads that governments are quietly requisitioning resources: steel, lithium, food stocks. In theory, it's precautionary supply chain stabilisation. In practice, it's hoarding. You watch politicians smile on camera while contractors dig behind them. One even declares, "We're all in this together," and you laugh so hard you spill your coffee. Joke 2, unplanned. That night you join a video call with colleagues scattered across time zones. Some are in labs, some in kitchen corners. You all look equally sleep-starved. Someone shows a drone feed of a completed shelter in Nevada, its entrance disguised as an art museum. Another shares satellite imagery of cargo rockets on an unlisted launch pad. "They're really doing it," someone whispers. Dr. Reyes, Annika, the dynamicist who first showed you the bad numbers, speaks last. "They think survivability is a subscription service," she says. Her tone isn't angry, just resigned. When it hits, those bunkers will be their own tombs. The universe loves irony. You picture it vividly. Underground palaces stocked with gourmet rations, air filtered through luxury, their inhabitants watching impact footage on high-definition screens before power fails. A small part of you wonders if the human species deserves an encore. Still, empathy sneaks in around the edges. Maybe these people aren't villains, just scared mammals with bank accounts. Fear democratizes fast, even if comfort doesn't. A notification interrupts your brooding, another leak, this time a recording from a bunker investors summit. The audio is grainy but clear enough. A voice you recognize, a famous CEO, asks, "How do we control the security staff after the event?" A pause. Another voice answers, "Lock the doors from the inside." You close the file and stare at nothing for a while. The arrogance of survival has a sound, that quiet click of imagined control. Outside, the world keeps spinning toward normal routines. Cafes are full, traffic snarls, students flirt between lectures. Humanity's ability to compartmentalize is its greatest strength and greatest curse. You pass a billboard advertising underground condos with the slogan "Luxury that lasts." Someone has spray painted beneath it. For whom? That's your third joke, unintentional but perfect in timing. You can't help but smile, though the smile tastes like rust. You end the day in a rooftop bar overlooking the city lights. Tiny, flickering, defiant. From here, it's easy to pretend the sky isn't harbouring an interstellar projectile. A bartender polishes glasses and says, "They say it'll miss us, right?" You answer, "They also said the Titanic was unsinkable." He grimaces. "Guess we'll need a bigger lifeboat." "Or better music," you add. He nods, taps the bar and turns up a playlist. The bass vibrates through the floor like a heartbeat, a reminder that even at the edge of oblivion, humanity dances. Far above, unseen, 3I/ATLAS keeps moving. Its icy tail a white thread stitching through black fabric. Somewhere, deep beneath mountains and seas, the rich rehearse eternity. You tilt your glass toward the sky and whisper, "Here's to equal opportunity destruction." You're escorted down a hallway that smells of lemon disinfectant and old carpets, the kind of institutional scent that pretends competence into being. Inside the International Response Council's conference room, the lights are deliberately soft, as if they are trying to make global panic look more palatable. Rows of delegation placards gleam in front of you. Ministry of Defense, Global Health Agency, Space Agency Consortium, Insurance Underwriters, Observer. The table is a ring of formal faces and fidgeting hands, each person practicing calm like a muscle memory. The meeting opens with ritual, a roll call, a statement of purpose, and a slideshow that begins with a reassuring headline. Coordination and Contingency, the title reads in neutral sans serif. You watch as the officials pass the comet's projected hazard into bureaucratic categories: immediate, near-term, long-term, collateral socio-economic effects, and slide their consequences into spreadsheets thick with cells and caveats. The language is designed to be airtight. The human meaning leaks through the margins. A mainstream historical fact lands neatly in the middle of the briefing. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 prohibits national appropriation of celestial bodies. Spokespeople cite it like scripture because when panic arrives, you reach for legal anchors. Historians still argue whether that treaty was naive idealism or visionary safety netting. Either way, it's the first legal rope anyone grabs when space behaves badly. You feel the odd comfort of law in the room. If nothing else, nations can argue over annexation even as the sky rearranges itself. The protocols, however, are designed for a different sort of problem: satellite collisions, radio interference, the occasional rogue rocket. This is a living document trying to dress for a funeral. People read paragraphs aloud, and each clause has an escape hatch big enough to drive a rescue ship through. You listen to legal counsel explain why invoking military jurisdiction would be messy, treaties, shared assets, and the political cost of admitting helplessness. You imagine a bureaucracy trying to write a will while the house is already on fire. A fringe tidbit gets mentioned in the coffee break chatter, a clause in a long-forgotten maritime salvage law that some legal theorists want to adapt. Finders keepers, if you can prove active mitigation. The idea circulates like a bad perfume. Private contractors could claim rights to any recovered material if they can salvage it under some invented transnational statute. The room tenses at the suggestion, not because it's impossible, but because someone in a suit somewhere will certainly try it. You laugh under your breath, joke one, picturing a law firm advertising, "Act now to claim extraterrestrial loot." The council divides into working groups. The science and reconnaissance cluster debates intercept options, kinetic deflection, fragmentation, or patience, while civil response plans evacuation zones and stockpiles. Information integrity is tasked with keeping the public informed but not terrified, a nearly impossible mandate. Each group speaks in its own tempo, scientists quick and numeric, logistics slow and precise, Politicians languorous with sound bites ready. You move through them like an interpreter who remembers every previous misquote. Someone in risk assessment slides up a map showing possible impact windows, layered with economic exposure models. The colours run from amber to deep, clinical red. You note how quickly finance charts make catastrophe feel like a balance sheet. GDP at risk, supply chain decay rates, markets that might suspend trading. It makes you think of an absurd headline you once read. Wall Street hedges against the apocalypse, and you snort quietly, joke 2. The room stares. You look as innocent as a spreadsheet. At one table, 2 representatives argue about prioritization of assets. One wants to secure critical satellites, navigation, communication, weather, because infrastructure is survival scaffolding. The other insists on protecting cultural patrimony, museums, digital archives, because what is survival without memory? Their voices circle each other politely, then with sharper edges. You listen as a historian in the corner reminds them that when Florence flooded in 1966, the rescue of art became a moral mission. Scholars learned then that preservation is not luxury but human continuity. Historians still argue whether prioritizing art over life is elitist or essential. The debate here is just as thorny. A diplomat clears her throat and mentions logistics. Who controls international airspace when a debris field begins to rain? The answer is a map of authorities and a tangle of competing claims. Pilots will refuse to fly, insurers will void policies, ports will close. These are the dominoes that nobody wants to admit can topple civilization in very ordinary ways. You picture a world where supermarkets are full of empty promises and not enough bread. A quieter, more poisonous conversation bubbles up. Intelligence agencies exchanging notes about anomalous transmissions. We've seen modulated signals coincident with fragmentation, someone says, in tones that mean more to colleagues than to the public. It's the kind of line you're not supposed to hear in international forums, because it reclassifies the event from disaster to encounter. The council files it under investigation, which is bureaucracy's polite way of saying panic as project management. You notice the performative compassion in the room. Handouts labelled psychosocial support plan, a list of hotlines, suggestions for public rituals. They will recommend candle vigils and community briefings to provide meaning. You think of the street preachers, the protesters, the cardboard signs from earlier scenes. You think of the ritual of boiling water in a storm and the small human economies of comfort. The officials plan their own rituals, press releases with calibrated empathy, footage of scientists in lab coats, slow-motion shots of children releasing paper boats. It is image craft as pastoral balm. Intermittent jokes surface because humans cannot hold solemnity for too long. Someone whispers, "We should issue commemorative stamps, limited edition, profits to disaster relief." Another mutters, "And include a coupon for a bunker discount." The room's tension loosens a notch with each absurdity. You count your quota of 3 little laughs for the night and let the sound be a small rebellion. Before the meeting breaks, the legal advisor drops a line that makes the air change temperature. Any recovery mission without unanimous counsel, consent opens significant liability under international law translation. No one can act alone without risk of crippling litigation. The room digests this like bad medicine. Coordination slows. Every decision now requires sign-off, and sign-offs take time. Time, here, is a currency that no treaty can mint. You leave the conference with a paper packet of recommendations that read like polite warnings. Outside, the sun is low, painting the plaza in long, honest shadows. Citizens cluster around televisions on the steps, watching snippets of the council excerpted into bite-sized broadcasts. A child tugs at her guardian's sleeve and asks, "Are we in trouble?" The answer delivered is careful and circular. You want to give a direct one, the kind you can say to a child. Sometimes the sky rearranges itself and we do our best. Instead, you offer a half smile and a joke. We're momentarily on a very inconvenient schedule, because humour is a kind of map. You walk away thinking about the machinery of international cooperation, how noble in theory, how glacial in practice. You remember that ancient legal anchor, the 1967 treaty, and you wonder if treaties written for satellites can really shepherd civilization through an incoming interstellar catastrophe. Historians still argue whether institutions evolve fast enough when the cosmos changes the rules. For now, they move forward in the only way they know: committees, memos, and 1,000 signatures that will try in their own stumbling way to buy humanity a little more time. The crowd outside the observatory fences looks like a cross between a music festival and a funeral procession. You step through clusters of handmade signs, each one a fragment of human theology printed on cardboard. God's final warning, math is a sin, deflect the devil. Behind them, a smaller group in lab coats holds up placards that say, "Trust data, not dogma." The air smells of sweat, candle wax and grilled corn from the street vendors who've decided that doomsday is still a market. News cameras hover everywhere. Someone is live streaming a preacher beside a physicist, the comment feed scrolling faster than either can talk. You feel the tension between faith and physics vibrating in the air like two strings slightly out of tune. Inside, the scientists hold briefings. Outside, the faithful hold vigils. Between them, you drift. 1 foot in reason, 1 in revelation. A mainstream historical fact comes to steady your thoughts. In 1919, when Einstein's general relativity was proven by a solar eclipse expedition, churches and universities alike claimed it as evidence of divine order. Historians still argue whether science borrowed authority from religion that year or quietly stole it. Either way, every discovery since has had to share a pew with belief. You walk among the faithful first. Their hymns rise in soft looping patterns, equal parts fear and tenderness. Someone presses a small paper pamphlet into your hand. The comet is the trumpet. The art shows a silver horn blowing fire into the oceans. The preacher, a tall woman with desert-dry eyes, says that 3I/ATLAS is not punishment but revelation. The light that burns away our forgetting. You thank her politely, half moved, half amused. She offers you a glow-in-the-dark bracelet printed with "See the sign." You pocket it. Across the street, the skeptics' rally is louder, brighter, full of sarcasm. A physics student stands on a crate shouting through a megaphone, "If the universe wanted to smite us, it wouldn't need an ice ball." The crowd cheers. Someone waves a banner that reads, "In math we trust," and you grin. That's joke 1 for the section, courtesy of the human species. At sunset, both groups pause to watch the sky. For a moment they are indistinguishable. Eyes lifted, mouths open, each person reflecting the same shimmer of light as the comet's tail grazes the horizon. For once, awe becomes bilingual. Later you slip into a small diner that stayed open purely out of stubbornness. The waitress has comet-shaped earrings and a name tag that reads "Hope" in glitter pen. She pours you coffee and asks, "So, scientist or believer?" You answer, "Both, depending on the data." She laughs. "Then you'll fit right in around here." On the wall behind her, the television alternates between 2 channels, one showing a live feed from a telescope array, the other broadcasting a televangelist proclaiming that salvation packages, $99.99 each, will guarantee a seat in heaven. The sound from both channels overlaps into a kind of absurd duet. You count that as joke 2, though it writes itself. Outside the diner window, a line of protesters marches past carrying both candles and calculators. Their chant is a hybrid prayer: truth in the sky, truth in the heart. You sip your coffee, unsure whether to laugh or join in. In a nearby city square, spontaneous rituals have begun. People build concentric circles of candles and stand inside them, telling confessions to strangers. One man kneels beside a telescope and asks the stars for forgiveness. Another reads poetry about entropy. It's messy, beautiful, and faintly ridiculous. A fringe tidbit hits the news feeds. Reports from rural communities claiming miracle lights preceding the comet's approach. Grainy phone videos show glowing shapes forming symbols in the clouds. Experts dismiss them as atmospheric optics, ice halos, auroral refractions. But the faithful are quicker with interpretation. The comet, they insist, is communicating. Hashtags bloom overnight. Hashtag ATLAS speaks. Hashtag light scripture. The scientists groan, but secretly you envy the simplicity of that certainty. By the next morning, someone has built an app that overlays comet tracking with daily horoscopes. Downloads hit 1 million in hours. "We monetize everything," you mutter, half in admiration, half despair. That's joke 3, unintentional but earned. You wander through the temporary marketplace of apocalypse, vendors selling star-shaped pastries, fortune-tellers offering trajectory readings. A child tugs her mother's sleeve and asks if the comet will hit them. The mother replies, "Not if we're kind enough." The scientist in you aches to correct her. The human in you hopes she's right. Inside the observatory gates, Annika is waiting. Her hair is tangled, her voice hoarse from too many interviews. They're framing this as belief versus data, she says, but both sides are just afraid of randomness. You nod. Order is easier to sell, she sighs. So is doom. Together you climb the stairs to the roof platform. The sky is crisp, threaded with satellites like faint stitches. 3I/ATL-AS hangs above the western horizon, a pale scar on black silk. You realise that everyone, believers, skeptics, bureaucrats, is really staring at the same wound and trying to name it. Annika adjusts the telescope, muttering about magnitude variations. The data scrolls. The brightness is fluctuating faster now, outgassing, or something stranger. You both watch in silence as the line graphs dance. Somewhere below, a choir is singing through loudspeakers, their voices drifting upward. Kyrie Ellison. Lord, have mercy. The sound mixes with the telescope's mechanical whir until prayer and precision become indistinguishable. You whisper, maybe that's the real intersection, between what we can measure and what we can't stop wanting to mean. Annika smiles faintly. That's almost poetic for a data analyst. You shrug. End times bring out my lyrical side. For a long minute, neither of you speaks. The comet burns brighter, a white pulse on the edge of everything. You can feel, beneath the debate, beneath the rituals, that fragile filament tying all of you together. Faith, fear, fascination. The holy trinity of a species that refuses to stop wondering, even when the countdown has begun. You wake to static. Every screen, every frequency, every telescope feed has gone dark at once, as if the universe itself blinked. In the hallway outside your quarters, scientists move like sleepwalkers clutching laptops, whispering words you've never heard sound so frightened. Data blackout. The wall monitors loop the same message. Temporary telemetry interruption. It scrolls in 4 languages, polite as an apology from a machine. You can feel the silence underneath it. No light curves, no positional updates, no heartbeat from the sky. Within an hour, rumours multiply faster than equations. Maybe the satellites have been hacked. Maybe the comet's charged tail ionized half the orbital fleet. Maybe governments imposed a deliberate blackout to buy time for public order management. The truth, you suspect, is all of the above and something worse. A mainstream historical fact surfaces to orient you. During the 1859 Carrington event, solar flares fried telegraph systems across continents, their wires sparking like veins of lightning. Historians still argue whether that electromagnetic storm merely inconvenienced the Victorian world or nudged it toward modernity by proving how fragile connectivity can be. You look around at the glowing devices in people's hands and think, if the sun could humble wires, imagine what a comet could do to clouds of data. At the control center, the staff tries to re-establish contact with the optical arrays. Antennas swivel, modems wheeze, diagnostics flash amber. Then, an anomaly. The instruments that should be silent begin returning something. Not the usual broadband noise, but tight, rhythmic packets of identical length. That's structured, someone mutters. Binary? Another guesses. A third voice whispers the word no one wants to own yet. Signal. You watch the data scroll, columns of zeros and ones forming faint pulse groups. They repeat every 37 seconds, steady as a metronome. Could be telemetry feedback, could be cosmic coincidence, could be intention. You feel your pulse sinking to it before you realise what you're doing. The director calls for calm. We treat this as interference until proven otherwise. You almost believe him, except for the tremor in his tone. The feed cuts again, total darkness, and the room collectively exhales the breath it didn't know it was holding. Outside, the blackout ripples through public life. Airports' ground flights citing navigation recalibration. Stock exchanges freeze trading for technical maintenance. Social media dissolves into speculation. A fringe tidbit blossoms online. A whistleblower claims the comet changed course during the blackout, its trajectory now bending inward, steering toward Earth's orbital path. The claim spreads like mold through fear-damp corners of the net. You know it's probably nonsense, but the word steering lodges in your chest. You and Annika head to the observatory's manual telescope, an ancient relic with real gears and glass. Clouds smudge the dawn. You take turns at the eyepiece, hoping for even a glint of the comet. Nothing. just emptiness where the familiar tail should slice the horizon. You murmur, maybe it's hidden behind solar glare. Annika doesn't answer. She's staring at the stillness as if it's a verdict. Later that day, the blackout spreads from observatories to the civilian grid. Communications lag, GPS clocks stutter, then whole regions lose power for hours. It's like the planet is forgetting how to talk to itself. You check an emergency frequency on an old transistor radio. The static there is different, warmer, patterned. You tilt your head and swear you can almost hear a rhythm beneath it, like breathing. Joke 1. If the comet's trying to phone us, someone should really answer collect. Government briefings follow, crisp and empty. Routine maintenance. Solar interference. All data intact. You recognise the tone, the same bureaucratic lullaby used for oil spills and market crashes. Yet even officials need someone to believe them, and you can see in their eyes that they don't. Night falls. With the grids down, cities become constellations again, candlelight and car headlights stitched together. From a rooftop, you watch people rediscover the art of looking up. Some chant prayers, others count seconds between the rhythmic pulses of static coming through their radios. The rhythm persists worldwide, identical everywhere. Someone posts the audio online and calls it the Atlas beat. Within hours, remixes appear, clubs play it, choirs harmonise to it. Humanity, being humanity, turns anxiety into art. Joke 2, delivered by the cosmos itself. Inside the observatory, backup power flickers alive long enough for a single image to arrive from an Antarctic telescope. It's grainy, corrupted, but unmistakable. The comet's coma has elongated into a sharp spear of light, its trajectory curve narrowing directly toward the inner system. You trace the arc with your finger. It no longer looks like chance. Annika studies the data, pale as the monitor glow. If it's changing course, she whispers, it means it's responding to something. Us, you ask, or maybe each other? She pulls up the telemetry logs from the blackout's first seconds. There's a tiny spike in magnetic flux, a pulse that coincides perfectly with the first binary burst. She circles it in red. Whatever happened out there, she says, it wasn't random noise. It was acknowledgement. You sit back, half terrified, half thrilled. The worst part of intelligence isn't finding out you're not alone. It's realizing you might be the junior partner. At dawn, power returns, but the signal doesn't stop. It's clean now, sharper, as if the comet has upgraded its transmitter. You record a few seconds on your phone before the battery dies. The pattern plays again. 37 seconds of silence, then 4 long pulses, then 2 short, then silence. You joke softly. Third one for the quota. Maybe it's just saying hi in Morse code and we're ghosting it. But even as you laugh, you notice the faint vibration underfoot, a tremor too steady to be wind or machinery. The world feels tuned to a frequency that wasn't there yesterday. The blackout is officially over, yet nothing feels illuminated. Across the globe, observatories report identical readings, and a single headline replaces all others: Comet changes course. Historians will one day argue whether this was the moment humanity crossed from observation into conversation. But tonight, as you listen to the signal tick like a cosmic heartbeat, you realise there's no turning the volume back down. You've stopped calling it a comet. Even in your notes, you abbreviate it now to simply the object. 3I/ATLAS was once a tidy line on a graph. Now it's an active verb, a presence. The world senses it too. Something in the collective weather has changed. People speak quieter, electronics glitch at predictable intervals, and birds migrate early as though their compasses know more than your computers ever could. At the observatory, the data that does survive shows that the object isn't just fragmenting, it's rearranging. Pieces shear off, slow down, and then align again, forming lattices that look nothing like debris clouds. They move with intent, geometry, and motion. You stand before the main display as the first clear time-lapse arrives. 5 fragments orbiting one another, tracing patterns of near-perfect symmetry. They flash intermittently, synchronized to that same 37-second pulse that has become background music for the planet. The patterns almost spell something, if spelling were measured in light. Fragments shouldn't behave like drones, Annika says from behind you, voice thin. They should spin apart. Maybe they don't like solitude, you reply, the joke too dry to count as humour but necessary anyway. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. When Galileo first pointed his telescope at Jupiter in 1610 and saw its 4 moons, the Church accused him of heresy. Historians still argue whether that outrage was about theology or about losing centrality. You feel the echo of that discomfort now, watching a machine of ice and intent write a new geometry into the heavens. Humanity's problem isn't that the universe is big, it's that we keep discovering bigger. The official narrative lags behind reality. Press releases call the formations dust aggregates. Television anchors smile through clenched teeth, promising that scientists are investigating optical illusions. But illusion doesn't cast radar shadows. The new radar images show the fragments glinting like articulated mirrors, adjusting angles as if sampling solar energy. One fragment even changes velocity relative to the rest. Small, deliberate, self-correcting. A fringe tidbit leaks from an aerospace insider. A private company has been secretly tracking coded bursts from the fragments at radio wavelengths reserved for deep space probes. The sequences, they claim, aren't random. They follow prime number intervals. Within hours, conspiracy channels declare the object a fleet, and the fleet a message. You watch as hashtags sprout faster than proofs. Hashtag Atlas Array, hashtag Prime Contact, hashtag Binary God. Downstairs, the engineering team runs motion simulations on the fragment choreography. Each time they overlay the pattern, a different shape emerges. Pentagons, spirals, something that looks suspiciously like a map projection. If it's a signal, one programmer mutters, it's using mathematics as grammar. Another replies, "Of course it is." That's the only language without dialects. You lean back, rubbing your eyes. "So we're being scanned?" "Scanned, tested, serenaded, take your pick," Annika answers. Historians still argue whether first contact will come through mathematics or melody. Maybe we're getting both. Outside, the world keeps oscillating between awe and hysteria. Cathedrals fill again. Stock markets collapse. Someone releases a pop single sampling the 37-second pulse. It debuts at number 1. You sigh. Humanity never met a potential apocalypse it couldn't dance to. Joke 1 logged. Night. You can't sleep. The sky hums faintly. An auditory illusion people call the Atlas tone. You step onto the balcony, radio in hand. The static now carries overtone frequencies, faint harmonics like chords tuning themselves. You tune across bands until you catch what sounds like modulation. Tiny shifts, deliberate as Morse. You record the sequence and feed it into translation software. The program spits out nonsense, repeating ratios, non-Euclidean symmetries, fractal recursions, yet something about it feels almost biological. You print the waveform, pin it to the corkboard, stare until dawn. The pattern resembles a human iris. Morning brings confirmation from multiple observatories. Each fragment has emitted brief, directed energy bursts toward the planet. Low power, precise targeting. No damage, no interference, just scanning. The world's commentators scramble for metaphors. Like medical imaging, one says. Like census taking, another counters. You imagine Earth caught mid-MRI, the patient too anxious to move. In a hastily convened video conference, government liaisons demand options. Can we shoot them? Jam them? Talk to them? The engineers explain gently that our best missiles would arrive years too late, and our strongest transmitters are as loud as whispers in a hurricane. The only practical response is observation. Bureaucracy doesn't like passive verbs. Annika watches the fractal display, her expression unreadable. Maybe it's just curious, she says. Maybe everything intelligent starts as curiosity. You nod, remembering that curiosity is what got humanity into every mess worth writing down. Joke 2, rueful. By noon, another pattern emerges. The fragments aren't merely circling, they're mapping the magnetosphere, tracing field lines, dipping in and out of radiation belts. It's as if they're reading Earth's biography written in charged particles. One fragment lingers above the Arctic for 6 full minutes before rejoining the formation. In that interval, radio networks in the Northern Hemisphere report synchronized interference, a brief whisper of coded light embedded in static. Analysts isolate it as a sequence of repeating 4-note tones. When played back through an audio converter, it sounds unsettlingly like a human sigh. You can't resist. Either the universe is flirting with us or diagnosing us. Joke 3 achieved, though no one laughs. The official communiqué call for calm. No evidence of hostile intent, they repeat. Yet intent is exactly what terrifies everyone, because randomness was easier to explain. Intelligence requires motive, and motive implies story. You suspect the fragments are telling one, written across magnetic fields and binary intervals, but you're missing the alphabet. That night, the sky blooms with auroras visible as far south as the equator. Greens and violets dance, rippling in synchrony with the 37-second rhythm. People gather on rooftops, mouths open, phones recording. You stand among them, every hair on your arms rising from static charge. Somewhere within the aurora, a single new pulse cuts through, brighter, slower, deliberate. The pattern changes. 4 long, 3 short, 1 long. Then silence. The radios stop humming, power stabilizes, the fragments freeze mid-orbit. Annika whispers, "It finished a sentence." You exhale, realizing you'd been holding your breath through the entire sky's soliloquy. The object's fragments hover motionless, glittering like punctuation marks at the end of an unreadable paragraph. Historians, if any survive to be such, will still argue whether that night was first contact or first diagnosis. For you, standing there beneath a world suddenly aware of its own reflection, it feels like both. Morning light leaks through the lab blinds, thin and cold as surgical steel. You haven't slept. Nobody has. The world hasn't blinked since the fragments froze in orbit. They hover there still, 5 crystalline seeds hanging in neat formation just beyond the magnetosphere, each one reflecting sunlight with mathematical arrogance. In the new imagery, one fragment glints differently. Not ice, not rock, but angles, right angles, lines too precise for geology. You zoom in, heart crawling up your throat. Inside the icy shell is a cavity. Inside the cavity, structure. The data comes from a probe you'd forgotten existed, a relic of a commercial asteroid survey that happened to be in the right place at the worst time. It caught 6 frames before its sensors fried. Those 6 frames are everything. Frame 1, a smooth dome half buried in translucent ice. Frame 2, a grid pattern along its surface, like ventilation or design. Frame 3, the dome splits open, not shattering but peeling, revealing interior scaffolding. Frame 4, light from within. Frame 5, an object emerging, shape indeterminate, geometry recursive. Frame 6, static. The room fills with a sound you've never heard in a laboratory before, collective exhale. A mainstream historical fact rises unbidden. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he described the moment not as discovery, but as seeing wonderful things. Historians still argue whether he felt awe or dread. You suspect it's always both. Humanity's reflex before the unknown is to reach and to recoil at once. You and Annika stand shoulder to shoulder. "That's not mineral," she murmurs. "That's architecture." On the 6th replay you notice details. Hexagonal reinforcement ribs, curvature ratios that follow the golden mean. You whisper, "Either nature's got a sense of design, or design learned from nature." It's not even a joke this time, just resignation shaped like wit. An email arrives from the International Response Council, marked urgent and pointlessly encrypted. A line reads, "Analysis of 3 I/ATLAS fragment internal geometry, classified as non-natural until verification." They might as well have written machine inside ice. Outside the observatory, news networks replay the probe's still images with breathless graphics. One headline blares, "Alien Seed Ship. Scientists divided." You rub your temples. Scientists are always divided. That's what keeps them honest. What divides you now is something deeper, a rift between what can be explained and what must be believed. A fringe tidbit surges through encrypted channels. An anonymous engineer claims the cavity resonates at a frequency near 8.3 Hz, the Schumann resonance, Earth's natural electromagnetic heartbeat. If true, the object isn't just parked near the planet, it's tuned to it. The claim is almost poetic, which makes it dangerous. Poetic things survive scrutiny less well than data, yet they travel faster. By afternoon, the surviving deep space probes reorient for confirmation. The best footage comes from an old European mission once destined to study solar wind. Its sensors capture faint emissions, microwave bursts repeating in ratios of 2, 3, and 5. You don't need translation software to recognize a pattern that's deliberate. "What if it's not communicating with us," Annika says quietly, "but with itself, through us?" You laugh. not kindly. You mean we're the fibre optic cable in someone else's conversation? Joke 1, accidental, but the team chuckles anyway. Nervous laughter has become background radiation here. The day lengthens and the scientific chatter mutates into theological argument. Television panels stage debates titled Creator or Colony. A Vatican spokesperson issues a statement urging calm, while a tech billionaire announces a first contact NFT drop. You switch the feed off before irony implodes reality. Back in the lab, the analysis deepens. The spectral emissions from the cavity include signatures of hafnium and tungsten, metals requiring temperatures higher than any comet could survive. One metallurgist whispers, "That's forged." Another replies, "Then forged by whom?" A conference call with linguists follows, because someone must always assume a message. They study the pattern of pulses, comparing it to everything from whale songs to pulsar timing to binary poetry. One linguist, an old woman with a voice like gravel, mutters, "If it's a message, it's addressed to itself." We're just eavesdropping on its diary. You scribble the line in your notebook because it sounds like prophecy. Midnight. The object remains inert, the 5 fragments perfectly still. Then, without warning, each fragment emits a narrow beam downward, not to Earth, but through Earth, straight through the mantle to points on the far side. The beams last exactly 7 seconds, forming a perfect star pattern across the globe. Seismographs twitch but do not panic. Then silence again. Annika whispers, "It's mapping the planet's core." You feel the air thin. Mapping could be reconnaissance or calibration. Either way, the intimacy is unsettling. The object knows Earth better than Earth knows itself. A mainstream fact collides with your thoughts. In 1977, the Voyager Golden Record carried greetings in 55 languages and a map of our solar system, a cosmic self-portrait. Historians still argue whether that was an act of optimism or hubris. Now you wonder if someone else once launched their version of Voyager and it found its way home to us. Later, analysing the beam coordinates, you notice something impossible. Each intersection point aligns with major archaeological sites: Giza, Angkor, Nazca, Easter Island, Stonehenge. Coincidence maybe, but coincidence is running out of places to hide. The object might be scanning for something that's already here. At 3:07 a.m, power dips again. The monitors flicker to show not static but images, schematics drawn in light, curves, nodes, repeating glyphs. For 3 seconds, the entire system acts as though it's possessed. Then it's gone, leaving only burned-in after-images on your retinas. Annika, pale and trembling, murmurs, "It wanted us to see that." You rub your eyes. Wanted, or just didn't care who watched? She doesn't answer. Outside, the aurora returns, weaker but pulsing. You think you see within it a pattern echoing the schematics, circles nested within circles, like a lens adjusting focus. The sight is too enormous to fit inside fear anymore. All that's left is awe, and a peculiar tenderness toward whatever intelligence just wrote its presence across the sky. You record one last observation before exhaustion claims you. The object no longer behaves like a visitor. It behaves like something remembering its way home. You close the log and whisper, "Welcome back," uncertain whether you mean it. They call it Cassandra in a meeting that smells like coffee and inevitability, a name that feels both prophetic and cruel. You know the myth, a voice that sees the future and is never believed. The irony is that every launch lately is a desperate prayer that someone will finally listen. Cassandra is less a ship than a hope grafted onto a stack of engineering compromises, a converted cargo launcher, a defense-tested upper stage, an instrument suite cobbled from retired probes and private donations. It leaves the pad like a late apology. You're there at the control tent when they light the night. The launch is noisy in the way that major decisions are loud. Cheers, curses, the ripple of technicians checking lists as if checking boxes could hold fate at bay. For a moment you remember Apollo 13, the mainstream historical fact that comforts and haunts. In 1970, a crippled spacecraft limped home because improvisation and courage outmatched disaster. Historians still argue whether Apollo 13's survival was luck disguised as heroism, or heroism refined into technique. Tonight, those arguments are moot. You just want the ship to fly. Cassandra's mission profile is simple seeming on paper and absurdly fragile in reality. Intercept, image, and, if necessary, nudge. Nudge, is a polite euphemism for a dozen messy options. Kinetic impactors, risk blowing the object into worse pieces, nuclear standoff, a gambit with diplomacy and physics both holding their breath. Gravity tractor, slow, precise, humbly hopeful. The trade-offs read like a moral calculus. Do you risk global debris to possibly deflect a strike, or do you gamble on the kindness of geometry? You watch the flight data scroll like a rosary. On board, the crew is small and human-sized. Commander Imani Sato, mission pilot, Dr. Luis Ortega, a propulsion wizard with a fondness for bad puns, and Meera Patel, systems engineer who once fixed a satellite with a paperclip and sheer personality. The ship also carries something less romantic. Virgil, an AI guidance package assembled from open-source autonomy layers and proprietary military code. Someone in procurement joked that if the mission fails, at least Virgil will have a good obituary. Joke 1, private and uncomfortable. You track Cassandra as it climbs through cloud and into a sky still humming with that 37-second pulse. The comms are bright with human chatter. The cabin sounds like a diner at 3 a.m, small talk underlined with gravity. Meera jokes that they should play the Atlas beat as a wake-up tune for later. Luis replies that if aliens have taste, they'll expect better music. The levity is a bandage for nerves, thin but necessary. Joke 2, levity is prophylactic. As Cassandra crosses into translunar injection and beyond, Mission Control hands off telemetry to a distributed network of volunteers, amateurs with backyard dishes and retired engineers keeping watch on forums where code and prayers mingle. You marvel at the way competence is decentralized, how someone in a shed with a patched antenna can be as crucial as a ministerial brief. It's a new kind of alliance, not countries, but curious people pulled across time zones. The interception burn is brutal and beautiful. Cassandra choreographs a rendezvous that is part ballet, part emergency surgery. The object is not static. It shifts, tests, and then responds. Its fragments humming like a stringed instrument tuned to the magnetosphere. As the ship approaches, Virgil coaches in a voice that is equal parts soothing and irritating. Adjust roll 2 degrees starboard. Compensate for micro-outgassing. The AI's calmness is contagious. You want to believe a machine that is programmed to be calm when the sky itself is not. At 300,000 kilometers, as Earth falls into a blue coin below, Cassandra's cameras resolve the nearest fragment into crystalline facets and inner hollows. The hull temperature readings spike. Interactions, not just reflection. Meera's voice breaks the static. They're not inert. You feel that sentence like a physical thing. It changes the tone of the whole mission from reconnaissance to conversation. Then the transmissions begin to wobble. Virgil detects structured emissions coming from the fragment, pulses within pulses, mathematics nested like dolls. The AI flags a pattern, prime intervals, nested ratios, a rhythm that matches the 37-second beat. Luis laughs, then stops. "We rehearsed for debris," he says. "We didn't rehearse being spoken to." The joke dies in the cabin like a candle snuffed by cold. Mission Control debates options with the calm of people trained to manage terror. The International Response Council is on the loop, diplomats and generals sharing a virtual table with engineers and ethicists. The question is surgical and brutal. Should Cassandra respond? If you ping back, you risk escalating something you barely understand. If you stay silent, you might forgo the last chance to signal a preference for survival over annihilation. You think of Cassandra the myth again, speaking and not being believed, and wonder which silence would be worse. Commander Sato makes the call on board. Send a low-energy return burst, a simple sequence modelled after Virgil's least ambiguous outputs. It's a polite hello, if planetary civility can be conveyed via timed radio. You brace as the packet leaves the antenna, an utterance of human engineering cast into the void. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then, like a tide reversing, light rearranges. The fragment blinks, considers, and emits back. A cascade that is unmistakably a reply, but layered in complexity. Virgil translates the first waveform, a series of geometric increments that resolve into an image. Not a face, but a map. A topological sketch of a function with a hole where a notation reads like arithmetic for breath. It feels intimate and inscrutable at once. You walk the thin line between exhilaration and dread as the crew speaks in short, ecstatic bursts. Meera whispers, It's answering our math with its math." Lewis blusters a joke. I always wanted to collaborate on interstellar origami, and you laugh because levity is the only antidote to vertigo. Joke 3, earned at orbital altitude. Then Cassandra transmits its final data: high-resolution images, spectral columns, and a short audio file of Virgil speaking the reply as best as the system can render. It is not human speech, but a rhythm that, when slowed, resembles a sigh drawn across cathedral stone. The ground receives and cues the file for analysis, but fate has its own latency. Moments later, mission telemetry flags a catastrophic cascade. Microfragment ejection from the object increases. A small, previously stable lattice begins to torque unnaturally. A pulse of charged particles overwhelms Cassandra's shielding. The crew goes quiet in a way that feels far older than any protocol. Commander Sato's voice is steady when she reports, "We're detecting vector changes inconsistent with passive debris, initiating safe separation burn." You watch the Delta V readout like a pulse monitor. Cassandra's maneuvers are precise, elegant, and full of the kind of courage that literature mistakes for inevitability. The final transmission is small and human. Sato's voice, low and steady. "If anyone hears this, tell my sister I made the orbit she always wanted to see." Then static takes the line. Instruments record a last burst, a concentrated energy spike, then a silence that presses like paper. Mission control scrambles, engineers shout, lawyers call, but the telemetry traces already a flat line. Cassandra is gone. The aftermath is noise that tries to be meaning. Some claim Cassandra succeeded. Its actions altered a fragment's path subtly, buying hours in the countdown. Others say it was a sacrifice, noble but futile. Historians still argue whether such missions are messianic folly or the best science has to offer when faced with the abyss. The argument will not comfort those who watched a human voice wink out in a sky that has started to feel too thoughtful. At night, you replay Cassandra's last log on a loop. Virgil's approximated rendering of the object's reply glows on the screen, a set of symbols that look a little like scales balancing a question. You find that you can't decide whether you're proud that humanity tried to speak or ashamed that the message may have been a request we couldn't grant. Outside, the aurora spreads like a veil. Somewhere someone plays a remix of the Atlas beat with Cassandra's telemetry as a bridge. The world will memorialize the mission in small ways: a plaque, a hashtag, a song. You think of all the names on the manifest and feel the absurd smallness of remembrance in the face of that geometric intelligence. You whisper, because some words must be said aloud even if they cannot be answered. "We tried." It is both consolation and indictment. The sky listens, and for the first time since the object arrived, you understand what Cassandra meant by prophecy: to tell truth that might be ignored, and to do it anyway. It's 9 hours to predicted contact when the sky turns the colour of melted copper. You've lost track of sleep, meals, even what city you're in. The air itself tastes of ozone and broadcast static, like someone is tuning the planet. Every radio still murmurs the faint 37-second beat, though it's slower now, stretched as if time itself were tired. People gather on rooftops, beaches, parking garages, everywhere with a view of the horizon. The world has paused in a kind of collective holding pattern. You walk through the crowd carrying your small field tablet like a talisman, watching strangers share earbuds and flasks. They've stopped arguing. At the end of things, consensus comes cheap. The official countdown streams on public screens. Impact T, 10 hours. It feels obscene, like a cooking timer for destiny. You remember a mainstream historical fact to stay grounded. In 1969, as Apollo 11 descended toward the moon, the guidance computer overflowed and Neil Armstrong had to land manually. Historians still argue whether the near crash was a miracle of training or pure dumb luck. Either way, humanity has always flirted with catastrophe and then called the date romantic. Now you're standing on another precipice, hoping dumb luck isn't finite. Annika finds you in the crowd, her parka zipped to her chin, eyes reflecting the aurora. "They're saying the object's fragments are slowing," she says. "Could be drag, could be intent." "Intent doesn't have units," you reply, automatic sarcasm for armor. "Maybe it should," she mutters. "Kilograms per conscience." Joke 1 lands soft and sad. Around you, screens show the remaining fragments converging, their orbital paths spiraling like petals closing at dusk. In Mission Control's feed, the analysts have stopped pretending. One admits on air, "We no longer model outcomes, just timings." The anchor thanks him for his honesty in the same tone one thanks a barista. The city's emergency sirens test and fail. Power grids hiccup under magnetic stress. Cars stall. Phones die. The silence that follows is so complete you can hear the flutter of paper as someone writes a last note. A boy nearby releases a cluster of helium balloons with messages tied to the strings. They rise fast, vanishing into the bruised clouds. You hope the object reads them before anyone else. A fringe tidbit has made the rounds online. That ancient flood myths align almost perfectly with predicted impact coordinates, as though history were déjà vu. Some archaeologist on a podcast swears the comet is a returning visitor, a cyclical reset button. You roll your eyes, then pause, because part of you wishes for the comfort of narrative, even a terrifying one. At T-6 hours, governments declare a final broadcast window. Every nation contributes a few minutes of cultural representation, symphonies, poems, laughter compilations, lullabies. The feed stitches them together into a global mixtape titled "To Whoever Finds This." You imagine aliens receiving it and thinking we were mostly sentimental, occasionally funny and chronically hopeful. Joke 2. At least the soundtrack slaps. Nobody laughs, but a stranger nearby squeezes your hand in agreement. By late afternoon, temperature sensors show abrupt drops. Atmospheric pressure dips like a held breath. The fragment's trajectories wobble slightly, then stabilize. Annika's voice cracks on the comm. They're aligning above the Pacific Convergence Zone. Straight column. If that's an accident, it's the neatest one in physics. Crowds everywhere look up. The sky blooms. No explosion yet, just light. A vertical lance of white piercing cloud to ocean. The moment freezes. Children gape. Streetlights blink on. Birds vanish from sight. The aurora folds inward, colours imploding to silver. You whisper, "That's not impact, that's arrival." Sensors worldwide register electromagnetic spikes, not thermal signatures. The column descends, touches the ocean and stops. The sea doesn't boil, it parts, calm as glass. From every vantage point, cameras capture the impossible, the object hanging a few kilometres above the water, motionless, luminous. It isn't destroying anything, it's hovering like a question waiting to be answered. Annika breathes. It's breaking. You laugh out of disbelief. The first interstellar visitor to obey traffic laws. Joke 3. Automatic. Reflexive. Around you, the crowd actually cheers. Raw relief breaking through exhaustion. Someone pops a champagne cork. Someone else sobs. For a heartbeat, humanity mistakes pause for pardon. Then the light intensifies, rippling across the waves, sending concentric rings outward that glimmer with static. Power surges reignite the dead billboards around the city. Each screen shows the same image, an abstract glyph composed of nested circles spinning slowly. The 37-second rhythm restarts, louder, syncing with your heartbeat. People raise their phones, though they no longer work, instinctively framing the miracle. In mission control feeds, scientists shout over one another, "It's creating a pressure dome! No heat signature. It's modulating the magnetic field." Every instrument maxes out. Then, abruptly, the glyph stops spinning. The light retracts. The object dissolves into 5 faint points again and slips back toward the upper atmosphere, trailing a filament of vapor shaped like a spiral staircase. The countdown clocks stutter, then freeze. The word aborted appears on official channels. No one knows who typed it. Annika whispers, "Impact avoided." You can't tell whether you're supposed to cry or laugh, so you do both. Strangers hug. Drones rise to film the calm ocean. Somewhere a street musician starts playing a trumpet, the notes quivering but unmistakably triumphant. But above the celebration, you notice something odd. The aurora hasn't faded. It pulses steadily, not random anymore. When you overlay the light curves in your tablet, they form words, not in letters but in ratios, harmonic intervals. It reads like music translated into mathematics. A message, but slower, more patient this time. Historians will still argue whether that was mercy or study, whether 3I/ATLAS chose restraint out of compassion, curiosity or calibration. All you know is that Earth just survived a question it didn't understand. As night falls, you sit on the rooftop with Annika and watch the faint points drift eastward, glowing like lanterns released from a cosmic hand. The world below erupts into spontaneous festivals. Fireworks, candlelight, choirs, humans marking the narrowest escape in history by making more light, as if competing with heaven. You lean back, exhausted, and whisper, "Maybe it just wanted to see if we'd notice each other before it hit." Annika smiles, the aurora reflected in her eyes. "Maybe we passed the test." You nod, unsure whether she's right, and let the rhythm of distant cheering blend with the quiet, lingering beat from the sky. A lullaby written by survival itself. The first thing you feel is vibration, subtle and constant, like the planet itself humming beneath your feet. It begins at dawn, low enough to mistake for wind, then deepens until glass trembles in window frames. Radios pick it up as a soft chorus, a harmonic cascade stretching from the ionosphere to the ocean floor. Someone names it the atmospheric choir, and the phrase sticks. It sounds hopeful, almost holy. You wake in your temporary quarters above the observatory, wrapped in a blanket that smells of solder and sleep deprivation. The power grid is erratic but stable enough to light the sky blue glow of data feeds. 3I/ATLAS, or whatever it is now, hangs fixed over the Pacific like a second moon. It isn't burning, isn't falling, it's singing. Spectrograms reveal tones layered in perfect harmonic ratios, 2 to 3 to 5 to 7, the same primes that defined its earlier pulses. The frequencies are beyond human composition. Even computers can't model their overlap cleanly. When slowed, the tones form chords eerily close to choral arrangements. You can't unhear the resemblance. "It's like the sky-learned music theory," you whisper to Annika. She grins without joy. "Maybe it's tuning the planet." A mainstream historical fact floats to mind. In 1952, composer John Cage premiered 4 minutes 33 seconds, a piece consisting of silence that wasn't silent at all. Audience coughs, shuffles, breath. Historians still argue whether Cage revealed music or mocked it. You wonder if this celestial performance is doing the same, teaching you that absence and presence can sound alike if you're listening hard enough. By noon, the phenomenon encircles the globe. Atmospheric sensors detect coordinated pressure oscillations, tiny but synchronized. The sky literally vibrates in rhythm. Birds adjust flight patterns, whales breach repeatedly as though responding to underwater echoes. Engineers begin measuring microcurrents in power lines that hum in tune with the same sequence. Someone jokes that the planet has been auto-tuned. That's joke one. No one's sure whether to laugh. Governments, freshly humble, call it a non-hostile acoustic manifestation. Translated, they have no idea. Religious leaders declare it proof of divine intervention. Music producers remix it within hours. The choir of Atlas track tops every streaming chart before the day ends. Humanity copes by dancing again. Annika stays at the telescope arrays, passing the modulation patterns. "It's communicating through resonance," she mutters, using the atmosphere as carrier medium. It's not just noise, it's mapped to magnetic flux lines. Each note corresponds to a specific field strength. She sketches sine waves until her notebook looks like ocean surf. Meanwhile, reports flood in from around the world. Northern lights visible in daylight, lightning storms forming symmetrical lattices, the smell of ionized metal drifting through clear air. Pilots describe halos around their aircraft that pulse to the beat. Satellites detect columns of charged particles tracing from the object to Earth's poles, massive but gentle, like threads of light sewing two hemispheres together. A fringe tidbit circulates online. An independent lab in Finland converts part of the frequency spectrum into digital code and claims it contains base pair analogues, a translation of DNA, but incomplete. "It's mirroring us," they post. The idea goes viral faster than the data can be checked. Historians, in some future you can almost see, will argue whether that claim was genius or delirium born of adrenaline. For now, it just adds to the roar of meaning. By evening, the sky's colour shifts with the sound. Amber when low, sapphire when high. Oceans mirror the hues. The world looks briefly choreographed. Annika whispers, "The ionosphere's acting like a speaker membrane. It's driving oscillations straight into the atmosphere. You imagine the entire planet as an instrument, a flute of stone and cloud." Then, suddenly, the tone fractures. A beat drops out of phase. Instruments spike alarms. Energy flux is doubling, then halving, then strobing in impossible precision. The sound becomes rhythmic thunder. 3 deep pulses followed by silence, repeated every minute. Your radio vibrates itself off the table. The feeds show the object's fragments shifting again, spinning around a central axis like gears meshing. The light they cast looks braided, spectral filaments weaving through cloud. "It's composing," Annika murmurs, eyes wide, using the atmosphere as staff paper. You step outside. The air is electric, hair on end, sky rippling with waves of light. The ground beneath you resonates so clearly you feel your pulse sinking with it. People around the world stand outdoors, eyes closed, faces upturned, listening. The fear that once knotted everything has softened into awe. You record a short clip for the mission archive, the horizon glowing, the sound between thunder and cathedral organ. You add a caption, "First documented planetary duet. Joke 2, you think. As night deepens, lightning forks upward instead of down. The aurora becomes curtains of silver fire. You see shapes in them, not letters, not math, but patterns repeating like DNA helices." Annika's voice cracks over comms. It's mirroring biological symmetry. It's harmonizing with life. That's when you realize the so-called song is not broadcast to Earth but through it. Oceans, forests and cities act as resonators, each landscape vibrating at its own key. Sensors pick up measurable temperature rises in photosynthetic zones, plants gently fluorescing as if photosynthesizing night. The planet is glowing from the inside out. In one delirious moment, every radio, every speaker, every human mouth seems to hum the same note. It lasts 10 seconds, long enough to believe that consciousness has become chorus. Then, the tone dissolves. The sky stills. The object dimensions. This silence that follows is too heavy to call peace. It's full of questions that sound like prayers. You and Annika look at each other, exhausted. She says, "Do you think it was trying to teach us something?" You answer, "Probably that we're loud." She laughs weakly, joke 3 fulfilled. Then her face softens. "No, really? Maybe it wanted to show what connectedness sounds like." You stare up at the pale scar where the object hangs motionless once more. "Then I hope we were listening." In the calm that follows, the world records everything. Seismographs, heart rates, whale songs, lullabies sung by parents who can't explain the music but hum along anyway. The data will fill petabytes, analysed for decades. Yet what lingers isn't the science. It's the feeling that for one perfect trembling minute, the planet learned to breathe in unison. Historians, if any get to write the coda, will still argue whether it was communication, calibration, or benediction. You just know it was beautiful, and that beauty might be the universe's oldest kind of mercy. When the sound finally stops, the quiet is unbearable. You don't realise how much space the music had taken up inside you until it's gone. The silence feels concave, like something's been scooped out of the air. Every machine in the lab is intact, every light steady, yet the room seems smaller. The reports start trickling in within minutes. A shock wave, not an explosion, not heat, has rippled across the upper atmosphere. The first data packets from low-orbit sensors show pressure fronts curling like fingerprints around the planet. Somewhere between the auroras and the thermosphere, energy condensed into something dense and deliberate. The object hasn't moved, but it has left a mark. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your fatigue. In 1883, Krakatoa's eruption sent pressure waves that circled the Earth 7 times and were heard 3,000 miles away. Historians still argue whether the 20th century's fascination with sound, the phonograph, the radio, the recording of memory itself, was born in that boom. You wonder if tonight's silence will birth something else entirely. Annika stares at her screen. We're picking up a repeating tone from orbit. Not natural. Satellite malfunction? She shakes her head. Origin stationary. 43,000 kilometers up. Geosynchronous. The same altitude where the object's shadow had been last mapped. You patch into the feed. The signal isn't the old 37-second rhythm, it's slower. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause. Morse code's first letter of the alphabet. A. You think of all the words that start there. Ask, answer, aftermath. The world goes half dark again as grids overload. Every transmitter within range of the new tone begins to echo it, like sympathetic strings vibrating in a giant instrument. Televisions flicker. The internet coughs. The first live feed to recover shows the Pacific blanketed in ash-coloured cloud and a vast spiral of lightning spreading outward from a single point. Annika zooms the satellite image until you can see concentric circles on the ocean's surface, shock rings still expanding. "The impact data's wrong," she whispers. "It didn't hit." It printed something on the atmosphere. Later, aircraft confirm it. The sea itself is unscathed, but the ionosphere glows faintly with a hexagonal lattice. It looks almost like a net, or perhaps a signature. You make joke one out of reflex. "Great, we've been watermarked." The scientists don't laugh. They're too busy cataloguing anomalies. Instruments across continents pick up faint electromagnetic whispers, identical down to the microsecond. The object might be transmitting through every molecule of air simultaneously. Then come the whispers from orbit, literally. Ground receivers convert the fluctuations into audio, and what emerges isn't random noise. It's a repeating hum that resolves into a modulated voice pattern. It's low, genderless, like wind learning to speak. The world collectively forgets to breathe. The first translation attempt runs through spectral linguistic software, yielding only partial phonemes. The words look like fragments of every language mashed together. Ash, silence, signal. You read the transcript twice, the meaning too poetic to be coincidence. "Could be pareidolia," someone says. "We're seeing meaning where there isn't any." Annika rubs her temples. Or maybe it's seeing meaning where there wasn't any before. The thought lodges in your ribs. Outside, the horizon glows pale grey. Fine dust, ash, but not from fire, drifts down, coating everything in a faint shimmer. Under microscopes it looks crystalline, almost symmetrical, not volcanic at all. A fringe tidbit sweeps the networks. Physicists claim the particles resonate with subatomic spin ratios identical to those of certain meteorites. Translation: the object has left pieces of itself behind, microscopic and everywhere. Children call it sky snow. Artists sculpt with it. Governments warn against touching it, then run out of authority when people ignore them. You touch it once, let a flake melt on your palm. It leaves no residue, only a brief warmth, like static electricity disguised as affection. Meanwhile, in orbit, the tone continues. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. It begins syncing with seismic activity, microquakes registering at the same intervals. The planet is being gently tapped, like a tuning fork tested for resonance. You joke too without thinking. Maybe it's knocking to see if we're home. By the second night, the ash clouds glow faintly, lit from beneath by city lights. The world looks inverted. Oceans bright, sky dim. From your window, the pattern seems deliberate, as if someone has drawn invisible constellations closer to Earth. The communications blackout partially lifts, enough for the remaining satellites to send back compressed packets. The data is garbled but carries one anomaly, a repeating image hidden in telemetry noise. When reconstructed, it forms a waveform identical to the one Cassandra recorded before going silent. Virgil's last message has returned, amplified. Annika overlays the 2 signals and gasps. It's recursive. They sent back what we sent them. Echo, you ask? Echo with intent. Historians someday will still argue whether this moment counted as the first confirmed dialogue or just coincidence stacked neatly enough to fool desire. You already know which side you're on. At dawn, a new transmission cuts through every remaining band. This time there's no rhythm, only one sustained tone that lasts 40 seconds. When it ends, power across half the globe resets simultaneously. Lights flicker, systems reboot, and every connected device displays a single line of text, language auto-translated to match the user's setting. It says, "We are still here." You whisper, "So are we." Annika exhales a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. Joke 3, involuntary and human. The message fades, the lattice dissolves, and the object finally begins to drift outward, its glow dimming as it ascends. But the tone lingers in your chest like a phantom heartbeat. You realise it isn't just in the air, it's in you. Later, as you record the day's log, you write a single line you can barely read through exhaustion. After the blast, there was ash, silence, and signal. And maybe that's how new stories start. The world is quiet again, but quiet is different now. It has texture, resonance, memory. You close your eyes, hearing the faint echo somewhere above the ionosphere, patient and deliberate. The object is leaving, or perhaps just giving you distance enough to listen. Weeks pass, or what you choose to call weeks. Clocks still tick, satellites still count seconds, but nobody truly trusts time anymore. The comet, or the object, or whatever new noun humanity is test driving this week, has drifted past lunar orbit, shrinking into a pale coin that winks once every 37 seconds. You wonder if it's waving goodbye or checking that you're paying attention. Below, Earth rearranges itself. The ash that fell after the sky's great chord has seeped into soil and sea. Crops sprout faster, corals fluoresce again, and physicists invent new adjectives for impossible. The atmosphere hums faintly, just above human hearing, a reminder that silence is never total. You spend your days with the survivors of science, a scattered alliance of researchers, students, and stubborn optimists. Their temporary base sits on the cliffs above what used to be Honolulu, half drowned, half reborn. Solar panels line the hills like metallic lilies. The air smells of salt and ozone. A mainstream historical fact becomes mantra at breakfast meetings. After the Black Death, Europe's population collapsed by half, yet the Renaissance bloomed from the ruin. Historians still argue whether tragedy fuels progress or merely clears the stage. You stir powdered coffee and decide it's both. Annika leads morning briefings with the tone of a general and the posture of a yoga instructor. The new readings show elevated nitrogen fixation, she says one dawn. Something in the ash is catalyzing growth. Someone jokes that the planet's been given fertilizer from space. You add, interstellar composting, very eco-friendly. Joke one earns tired laughter, the rarest and most valued commodity left. People have started calling the survivors the resonance, not because you hum, but because you listen. Every radio tower you repair picks up faint echoes of the atmospheric choir, stretched thin across static. Some swear the patterns change with emotion, as if the planet's own mood alters the signal. You suspect psychosomatic comfort, but you let them have it. Faith comes in any frequency. Cities are quieter now, though not dead. In Tokyo, people paint murals of the object as a lantern instead of a weapon. In Nairobi, engineers use the leftover lattice frequencies to power clean generators. In Reykjavik, choirs rehearse harmonies based on the recorded tones of the atmospheric song. Humanity, it seems, refuses to waste a good apocalypse. A fringe tidbit circulates through the amateur science channels. A monastery in Tibet claims that some of their brass bells now ring spontaneously at dawn, synchronized to the object's distant pulse. The monks call it a blessing. You call it resonance. Either way, pilgrims start climbing the mountains again. By evening, the community gathers on the beach. The Pacific has calmed into mirror glass. Children toss skipping stones that glow faintly when they hit the surface. Phosphorescent algae dancing where ash still lingers. The effect is accidental magic, your favourite kind. A small boy approaches you holding a seashell. "Can I hear it?" he asks. You press it to his ear. Inside, the faint hiss of air sounds like distant wind. No, like that same 37-second rhythm. He looks up, wide-eyed. "It's still singing," he says. You smile, then it's not finished yet. That night you write in your log, perhaps the worst outcome imaginable was not destruction, but inheritance. Sleep comes slowly. Dreams arrive faster. Cities made of light. The object descending not to strike, but to seed, to gift the planet a new instrument. You wake to dawn's thin gold and the smell of seaweed. Annika sits nearby, sketching patterns in the sand. She looks up. "Did you ever think we'd survive curiosity itself?" You shake your head. "We never survive it. We just keep growing around it," joke two, quiet and rueful. Later, you help a group of children assemble an antenna from scavenged parts. The goal is simple: record whatever remains of the object's signal. When it powers up, a faint hum threads through the speaker. 3 notes, then a pause. The same chord from the atmospheric choir, but softer, slower. You record it, play it back, realize it's modulating around human heart rate. Annika leans close, whispering, "It's adapting to us." Or we're adapting to it. You stare across the water where the horizon glows faintly, as if backlit by memory. The planet feels young again, and you're not sure whether that's comforting or terrifying. Every evening, the community holds what they jokingly call sky worship. It isn't religion, not exactly, more like gratitude shaped into ritual. People gather with lanterns made of glass ash and hum the same simple tune. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. It fills the air like a heartbeat trying to remember its lyrics. You join in, feeling the vibrations climb your ribs. For a moment you imagine the object listening, far out there, cataloguing the sound of a species learning harmony. Historians, If anyone earns that title again, will still argue whether the post-impact calm was divine reprieve or scientific aftershock. They'll dig through your logs, your jokes, your weariness, looking for the exact instant humanity crossed from fear into wonder. You think they'll find it here, in the dusk between ruin and rebirth, when the world still smells of salt and possibility, and you, standing barefoot on black sand, realize you're no longer waiting for the sky to fall, you're waiting for it to answer. Annika nudges you. Listen, she says. Somewhere beyond the surf, that old rhythm stirs again. 3 notes bending into 4, then 5, building towards something new. You grin. It's improvising. Joke 3 lands perfectly this time, light and human. She laughs, eyes bright. Maybe we taught it jazz. You both listen as the melody drifts over the ocean, equal parts farewell and invitation, and you realize the future isn't a countdown anymore. It's an echo, and you are finally part of its chorus. You step into the dig site with gloves still smelling faintly of solder and sea salt. The way a living person might carry souvenirs of a life that nearly ended. The place is a museum turned trench, mesh tents, slow-moving brushes, and students with sunburned necks who look at you like you're the primary source document they have been promised but never expected to find. Centuries of rumour have already loosed themselves into myth. Museums display hammered shards from that week. Journalists tell tidy stories about the day the sky sang, and 1,000 urban legends have turned scientists into saints and apocrypha into scripture. You are here, up to your elbows in curated mud, because you believe in the messy compromise called evidence. The mainstream historical fact that anchors you is older than electricity. Archaeologists digging in Pompeii in the 18th and 19th centuries learned how to read sudden catastrophe. Bodies, roofs, frescoes, frozen and thus legible. Those casts taught the world that disaster buries context as neatly as it preserves it. Historians still argue whether Pompeii's preservation is a curse or a crystallizing kindness for posterity. You keep that lesson close. The ash and slag left by the Atlas event preserved things nobody thought to protect, and that complication is both your blessing and your job. The team calls the site a melange, a technical French-flavoured word that is a polite way of saying a god-awful tangle. Data drives, server racks, and melted fibre-optic trunks lie intermingled with ceremonial objects, a bronze statue of an unknown mayor, a child's plastic toy shaped like a rocket, a singed hymnal with fingerprints scorched into the margins. Someone has nailed a cassette tape to a post as a joke. Its label reads Cassandra. Last words, do not rewind. You laugh because laughter is a map back to sanity. Joke 1. You brush away compacted ash from a slab that once held a lab terminal. Underneath, magnetic domains have crystallized into patterns, literal, durable fingerprints of binary chatter. The preservation is maddeningly precise. Some sectors of the disk show a flux pattern that, when run through emulation, spits back fragments of Virgil's speech, the AI's last attempt to translate the object before the mission went dark. There it is, imperfect, halting, a machine's gasp. You feel foolish and honoured to be reading a whisper meant for the future. The fringe tidbit people like to whisper in campfires and late-night forums is half wonder, half urban myth, that certain microbes, colloquially called memory fungus, thrived in the ash and, through biochemical luck, organised iron particles into quasi-magnetic lattices that preserve data far longer than any solid-state device should have. The microbiologists on site are embarrassed but intrigued. They talk quietly about extremophiles and magnetotactic bacteria, as if speculating about angels. You note it down because even the ridiculous possibilities deserve test tubes and paper. Historians still argue whether the most reliable records are the ones left intentionally, or the ones the disaster forces into being. Do you trust the official communiques, the sanctioned transcripts from the International Council, or the scratchy videos and social posts uploaded during the panic? The archaeological record complicates that choice. Public relations copies of Cassandra's final transmission differ in tone from the raw Virgil snippets you've recovered, partially because legal teams redacted phrases, half for confidentiality, half for narrative hygiene. The discrepancies are what make your job necessary. You're a professional picker-apart of stories. You find a fetishized object that makes the late-night forums explode when it goes public. A small black cube, heat-pitted and suspiciously symmetrical, with grooves that catch the light like writing. The pundits immediately call it a data reliquary. The team's material scientist runs scans and discovers it is a composite of tungsten, microlattice, and silica, the sort of thing a high-energy process could make. The lab reports read like a thriller, not of terrestrial manufacture likely, isotopic ratios anomalous. That phrasing, so diplomatically useless, is what the press turns into headlines. The cube becomes both relic and Rorschach test. Believers see message, skeptics see artifact, and you, standing with a brush in your hand, see only another question. You catalogue the cultural detritus with tender, practical rituals. The diaries of an NGO relief worker, smudged with coffee and tears, offer more sociological insight than many polished reports. Someone's sketchbook contains a drawing of the atmospheric choir notated as if it were sheet music. A child's burnt stuffed crocodile appears again and again in the pockets of survivors' clothing. Call back to the absurdity you once heard about crocodile dung sunscreen, and you smile because humanity keeps its jokes even while rebuilding. Joke 2, tender and small. Conversations around the trench veer into scholarly arguments, exactly the kind that will one day make journals hum. Was the object reconnaissance or benevolence disguised as experiment, a postdoc asks, fingering a corroded screw? Did it sample our biosphere to learn, or did it test our responses to create contingency? Another researcher counters, we risk anthropomorphizing pattern-seeking animals. Historians still argue whether attributing motive to non-human actors is projection or interpretation. You find yourself taking the middle ground, an uncomfortable seat where curiosity meets restraint. One discovery halts you in a way that paper and conference talks cannot replicate. In a cache of burned servers, you recover a subdirectory of footage from Cassandra's final approach, raw, unedited, and human. There is Imani Sato peering out a viewport, laughing under her breath at something Louis said about interstellar origami. Mira leans in and says, "If this is the last thing we get to do, I want it to be honest." Their faces, ordinary and brave, dissolve any sterile debate about whether missions like Cassandra are folly or virtue. In the end, you decide the answer is both. This duality becomes the guiding artifact for an upcoming symposium titled Ethics and Sacrifice in Exoplanetary Defense. The irony feeds academic grant cycles for years. As you catalogue, a local poet shows up at the trench with a thermos and a stack of photocopied verses. He reads aloud to the students, lines about ash that becomes soil, about songs that teach the planet to breathe. The lines are awkward, but they ring with something true. You realise that archaeology is not just about objects, but about the stories people make of them. That impulse to tell will be what keeps memory alive when physical things are eroded. Night falls and the camp becomes a constellation of headlamps. You sit with other archaeologists and trade small, absurd observations about the past, who hid what in their backpacks, which official tried to claim salvage rights over a shard, which rinsed their coffee cup in seawater and later swore it tasted of ozone. These are your jokes, private, necessary. Joke 3 is a whisper. We're the least glamorous grave robbers in history. Everyone laughs because the truth is oddly consoling. Before you turn in, you copy one last file from a remnant drive, a fragment of Virgil's log where the AI tried to explain the object in plain terms. Its translation is imperfect, but one line remains crystalline. We learn the tones of home, you sing back. You read it twice, then again, as if comprehension was a muscle to be warmed. The line is both evidence and elegy. When dawn bleeds into the trench, you pin the day's index cards to the board and step back. The archive grows, messy and stubborn. Papers, drives, poems, cubes. You understand that future historians will argue over each piece, will litigate meaning and motive in journals and courtrooms. For now, you have the authority of the moment, dirt under your nails, the smell of ash, and the knowledge that the worst outcome imaginable mutated into something else, an inheritance that asks questions rather than delivers answers. You close your field notebook and whisper into the cold air, a ritual for whoever will one day read these pages. We did our best to listen. It is not a heroic claim, it is a human one. The world may write many versions of this week, but you, who scrubbed the ash and numbered the fragments, know the smallest truth, that even in catastrophe, people keep their hands busy, and that busy hands often turn ruin into story. It starts again, not with a scream or a song, but with a quiet ping in the cold. Somewhere in the far infrared sweep of the James Webb 2 Array, a single anomaly appears, Astronomers argue for 2 days before admitting what the data already knew. Another interstellar body has entered the solar system. Its spectrum, its shape, even the pulse hidden in its tail, all identical to the visitor you once called 3I/ATLAS. Only this one isn't accelerating in, it's decelerating. The first public notice is cautious, a familiar object, inbound. You can almost hear the scientists trying to whisper through their excitement. The world, older now and less surprised by the cosmos, reacts with measured disbelief. Stock markets don't crash. Churches don't fill. The memes, however, multiply. Welcome back, Atlas 2.0. Someone designs a t-shirt that reads "Break for Planets." Joke 1, communal and collective because humour survives anything. You're older, working in a university built on the bones of the old observatory. Annika heads the new Institute for Resonant Studies. Your hair is white around the edges, and you drink tea instead of coffee. When the alert comes through, she finds you on the roof, staring at a sky you promised yourself you'd stop waiting on. "It's slowing," she says simply, "matching orbits." "That's not a visit," you reply, "that's a rendezvous." The planet below has changed in ways subtle and large. The ash of that earlier event, rich in elements no periodic table foresaw, has coaxed crops to grow in thinner soils. Coral reefs bloom in places that used to be wastelands. Energy grids hum on ambient resonance technology derived from the atmospheric choir. The object's fingerprint became infrastructure. Children are taught not only the periodic table, but the harmonic table, frequencies mapped to ecological stability. Humanity turned catastrophe into curriculum. A mainstream historical fact steadies your thoughts. When the Rosetta probe landed on Comet 67P in 2014, it was hailed as a triumph of engineering and patience, a robot embracing a stone. Historians still argue whether that moment marked the beginning of humankind's practical romance with comets, or the end of our innocence about touching them. Now you watch a new generation prepare to touch back. Annika's students track the inbound object. Its albedo softer, its tail less frantic. It's not burning so much as gliding. "It's using controlled drag," one student murmurs, equal parts terrified and thrilled. You realise that the sky has never looked more graceful. Governments convene, but their tone has shifted since the first arrival. No one talks about deflection anymore. They talk about protocol, dialogue, welcome. There's even a draft treaty, the continuation accords, outlining what to do in the event of mutual recognition. Lawyers still write it in the cautious grammar of risk management, but you sense hope underneath. The same bureaucracies that once managed panic now manage possibility. A fringe tidbit spreads through the new academic channels. Gravitational wave detectors have picked up a low-frequency oscillation preceding the object's arrival, a ripple that seems to carry structured data. One analyst swears the waveform corresponds to the closing chords of the atmospheric choir, as if the cosmos were rehearsing before curtain call. No one has disproved it, so the story sticks. Night after night, telescopes capture sharper images, a crystalline hull, familiar yet altered. There are differences, additional struts, new symmetry, scars healed or redesigned. "It rebuilt itself," Annika says softly. "Or maybe it built a version that learned." At conferences, scholars revisit every unanswered question from your youth. Was it machine, organism, idea? Did it mean harm, or did harm simply accompany learning? Historians still argue whether calling it the worst outcome imaginable was ever fair. Maybe that phrase only belonged to an era that measured tragedy by mortality instead of transformation. You and Annika are invited to the new international array in Chile to witness the re-entry of the decelerating body. The air there is knife-thin, stars crisp enough to cut your retinas. The object, smaller now or perhaps merely efficient, slides into view above the horizon, glowing the same patient blue as before. It halts well beyond the moon's orbit, stationary against all common sense. Then, delicately, it releases a pulse. This one isn't a beat. It's a patterned pause. Light, dark, dark, light. Binary punctuation. Virgil's archives translate it as a syntactic marker, something between a greeting and an ellipsis. The room full of scientists and poets alike inhales as one. Annika whispers, "It waited until we could answer." She turns to you. "You still have the old receiver?" "Of course you do. The battered transceiver from the resonant years, patched with ceramic and stubbornness. Together, You feed in a reply, a simple harmonic sequence based on the atmospheric choir, slowed to match its new tempo. The signal leaves Earth like a sigh. For 11 minutes, nothing. Then, from orbit, the object brightens and releases 5 smaller spheres that drift outward, forming a ring. Each sphere ignites with soft colour: red, gold, green, violet, indigo. They pulse sequentially, repeating your melody. Then the central body responds with a single white flare that washes the instruments in saturation. Joke 2 escapes before you can stop it. We've just been colour-corrected by an alien art critic. Even the graduate students laugh. The instruments keep recording long after the human noise subsides. The object doesn't approach, it waits. Analysts suggest it's building an orbital lattice, a halo of data relays. Others think it's growing. You think it's listening. Back in your tent, you record a note for the archives. The second visitor has paused, decelerated, reflected. The first event taught us to survive awe. This one may teach us to reciprocate it. The pen shakes in your hand, not from fear but from age. Annika joins you outside to watch dawn soak the Andes in copper. Do you ever wonder, she asks, whether they sent the first one as a question and this one as the answer? You nod. Or maybe the first was the answer, and we're finally forming the question. Joke 3. Gentle, weary, true. She smiles. Either way, they came back. Above the thinning clouds, the object lingers, faint as breath but impossible to ignore. It decelerated to match you, a gesture so deliberate it feels intimate. The air smells of dust and dew, 2 things the Earth still does perfectly. You imagine future historians passing this second arrival, debating intent, crafting footnotes about tone and meaning. Let them. For now, you simply stand beside your oldest friend and listen to a universe that, for the first time in history, might be waiting for you to speak first. You've lived long enough to see the stars change colour. That's not poetry, it's calibration. The object's halo has been up there for 27 years now, faint but steady, bending starlight in rhythms you can measure with an old spectrograph and a little patience. People call it the ring, the lantern, the mirror, depending on which language you wake up in. You've given up correcting anyone. Whatever name you choose, it's family now. Down on Earth, life has rewired itself around that slow pulse from orbit. Crops bloom on cycles synchronized to its glow. Migratory birds follow its shimmer like an extra moon. Children born since the event, those they call the resonant generation, can pick its frequency out of background noise the way others hear a favourite song through static. They hum it absent-mindedly when they work, when they pray, when they dream. You sometimes wonder if the object modified the planet or merely reminded it of an older pattern buried in the mantle's hum. The Institute has grown into a city of labs and gardens. Annika's portrait hangs in the entryway, all sharp lines and patient eyes. She didn't live to see the ring's second brightening, but her equations did. That feels appropriate. Equations, like myths, outlive their authors. You still teach once a week. Histories of Contact, a course that is part science, part oral tradition. The students like the jokes more than the facts. Joke 1, every semester. The worst outcome imaginable was paperwork. It never fails. They ask you what the object wanted, you tell them that's the wrong verb. It didn't want, you say. It behaved. We're the ones who turned behaviour into intention. They write that down dutifully. Some will turn it into a thesis, others will tattoo it. You've seen both. A mainstream historical fact has become a meditation for you. When Voyager 1 left the heliosphere in 2012, it carried a golden record with music, greetings, and directions back to Earth. Historians still argue whether that disk was humility or arrogance, our attempt to preserve ourselves or to advertise. The ring, orbiting above now, feels like a reply. We sent sound outward, the cosmos sent resonance back. Call it symmetry, call it grace. The fringe tidbit of the decade is the claim from a linguistics team in Lagos. They believe the ring's latest modulation encodes an algorithm for translation, an interface that turns physical resonance into language. They've built a prototype they call Chorus, a tower-shaped instrument that hums when you stand near it. Children run up to touch its panels and swear they hear words whispered in their own voices. The skeptics roll their eyes. The romantics call it proof that understanding begins as self-recognition. You find yourself quietly agreeing with both. At night from your balcony you can see the faint shimmer of the ring and its 5 satellites tracing the equator. They don't blink like ordinary craft. They breathe. Once every few months, a coordinated flare sweeps across them, a slow ripple of light that lasts exactly 37 seconds. The first time it happened, people panicked. The second time, they celebrated. The third, they built a holiday around it. Now it's just called the listening. During the listening, cities dim their artificial lights. People gather outdoors, faces tilted upward, silent until the ripple passes. It's not worship, it's etiquette. The younger ones bring instruments, play along softly. The melody changes each year, but always resolves in a major key, as if optimism has become instinct. You suspect the object learns from that. On the night of the 27th listening, you sit by the water with your students. The sea glows faintly with the same photonic residue that once terrified you. Somewhere, someone releases a handful of phosphorescent dust into the waves, and the pattern it makes matches the harmonic table's base sequence. The students think it's coincidence. You know better. Coincidence was an extinct species the moment 3I/ATLAS slowed down. One of them asked the question that always comes last. "Professor, what happens when it leaves?" You answer honestly. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything it taught us will keep echoing long after it's gone. The thing about resonance is, it fades, but it never really stops. You pause, then add, "If it goes, it'll only be to listen from a distance." They seem satisfied with that, though one mutters, "I hope it takes good notes, joke too, spontaneous and perfect." The group laughs, and you realise you love this world more for its absurd resilience than for its enlightenment. Later, alone, you write your final log entry. The pen feels heavy, the air light. The ring continues to hum. Humanity has learned patience in its orbit. We harvest light in measured breaths. The apocalypse became apprenticeship. The worst outcome imaginable turned out to be the one that made us pay attention. You seal the note and send a copy to the Institute archive. Then you walk outside for the last minutes before dawn. The ring brightens without warning. No alarm, no analysis, just sudden radiance spilling across ocean and cloud. It's beautiful, silent, deliberate. The flare lasts exactly 37 seconds, then fades, leaving a single new star in its wake. Tiny, persistent, slowly moving east. Maybe it's leaving, maybe it's writing, maybe it's planting another comma in a sentence too vast to finish. You grin, whispering your last official joke. Number 3, a personal record kept faithfully since that first script began. Guess we're the sequel. Somewhere overhead, the light answers in rhythm. It's not a message this time, it's acknowledgement. You feel it in your chest more than you hear it. Historians will still argue whether humanity ever truly had a conversation with the cosmos, or merely learned to harmonize with its background music. Let them. You close your eyes, listen to the long fade of resonance, and think the simplest thought in the language the object taught you. We are still here. The pulse softens, stretching out into a sound that is less rhythm than breath. You imagine it drifting through oceans, through forests, through everything still alive enough to hum back. The air tastes clean, metallic with dawn, gentle with salt. Each inhalation feels slower now, deliberate, as if the planet itself is teaching you how to rest. You picture the ring's light sliding around the curve of the world like a nightlight in a child's room. The students have gone quiet beside you. The water moves in perfect loops. Even the waves seem reluctant to disturb this last calm. For the first time in decades, you allow yourself to believe that stillness can be safety. Somewhere, the cosmic machinery keeps turning, patient, enormous, indifferent, and kind. The object, seed, mirror, guest, continues its slow drift into shadow. It leaves behind a sky stitched with small certainties, the colour of survival, the sound of laughter, the faint afterimage of everything you managed to love. You lean back, feeling the sand cool against your spine. The universe has stopped speaking in data and started whispering in lullabies. The words are simple, the translation immediate. Rest now. You listened well. The horizon lightens to silver. You close your eyes, and the last thing you hear is the tide answering the sky in time with your breathing. 2 rhythms merging into one long, peaceful note. It lasts just long enough to carry you across the threshold of wakefulness and into sleep.